Hey guys, Pete here. Today we're here to talk about Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 11, Breaking Bad. Not to be confused with the Breaking Bad episode, Better Call Saul. We did get our big return of the main characters of that show, which was fun to watch and added some things to the main character here's story, Jimmy McGill, aka Saul Goodman, aka Gene Takovic. I enjoyed this episode. It's been keeping up with this trend of being satisfied, being satisfying in a strange way. Not exactly what I'm hoping for when I go into it, but always kind of surprised at what they come up with and how interesting things are, like how they're approaching this and not knowing what's going to happen next. It's all pretty exciting. I have asked some of my friends to come here and talk about that today, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a second. Um, they'll give us their overview of what they thought about the episode now that they had a day or a sleep to let it sink in. And then I'll come back around. We'll talk about that. We'll answer your questions and we'll hit on some other points we want to talk about. So, Gil, why don't you introduce yourself and let me know what you thought of the episode?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me on, Pete. I'm Gil from the YouTube channel One Take and the podcast Saulcast. I love the episode. I really, really love the episode. Even putting aside the Breaking Bad stuff, just the gene of it all, they got us to essentially watch an addict spiral hard into a relapse. I think that's essentially what we were seeing with Gene. But they got us to not want to look away from it because it's another fun scheme. It's another fun montage. And they somehow still kept me hoping that maybe Gene wouldn't go too far. For example, toward the end of the episode, you get to that big moment where he finds out that the latest mark has cancer. And it definitely hits him. And at least I was hoping, okay, maybe he'll see this is a step too far. His conscience is still there and he'll walk away. But of course, he doesn't. So it was a very tragic and sad episode, which seems to be the trend lately. I think it was nice that we had Nippy right before this, get a little bit of a breather. So it was a tough episode, but there was enough there to not make us just look away from the awfulness. And then the Breaking Bad stuff, we've been wondering for so long, how do you revisit the Breaking Bad timeline without it just being for fan service? And for me, it did two important things. One, it showed us the Breaking Bad timeline from Saul Goodman's perspective and how he thinks of it, at least at the moment, as Gene. And as Gene, he's based off of the particular moments he pulled out and that we saw as flashbacks. It seems that he sees himself as a pretty important piece of pulling Walt up from the minor leagues and introducing him to Gus, advocating for him when Mike said that he shouldn't. So he thinks of himself, I think, as largely responsible for a lot of what happened in the Breaking Bad timeline, which makes it all the more impactful when we see that he is repeating the same mistakes. He's doing the exact same thing again. It makes it very clear that Jimmy is stuck in this awful pattern. He's repeating it. And that's why I think it's such a hard episode to watch. And they used the Breaking Bad timeline and the fact that that show is so important to us. They used that to make that hit even harder. So it was a great episode for me.
Cool. And Courtney, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Courtney from Courtney's Reviews. All I've talked about so far on my channel is Better Call Saul. I just started it back in March. So do analysis and sometimes prediction and theory videos. Although I've stopped doing that because I just find it like I can't really every idea I've had, a couple of them have been confirmed, but they just keep throwing curveballs, and it's so much fun just to see where they're taking us on this ride. And I share some of your sentiments, Gil. I really liked this episode. At first, when I was first watching it, I was like, with the cold open in the Breaking Bad, I was like, okay, so we're seeing it from his perspective. And I had originally imagined that we would get something we hadn't seen before. And of course it is from his point of view. So I was but as the episode went on, I could see how it worked thematically to give context to what was going on with Gene, because apart from that, the 5 minutes we got from the previous episode where we see him on his rotating bed and going about his day, we don't really get to see Saul, and Saul is really the monster, isn't he? So this was, I think, a good reminder of what happened in that gap that we weren't shown, just reminding us like what Saul Goodman actually did. I mean, the Howard thing aside, right, in that scheme and how awful that was, he went on to commit far worse offenses, right, throughout Breaking Bad. And I have a lot of thoughts about this one. I'm still in the process of working on my breakdown. I'm a little slower than everyone else. So just wrapped up a semester, getting grades in, answering panic student emails, stuff like that. So, it's been keeping me busy. But I tend to think very literarily. That's kind of my wheelhouse. And I keep thinking, I'll give you guys a little spoiler about what my thesis is in my breakdown analysis, is this is the story of Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is this autochthon, this being that is made up of parts of other men. And that's how I see this character. So he's a little bit Jimmy, he's a little bit Saul, a little bit Gene, but he's also, as this creature, something new. And we got quite a few Frankenstein references throughout the episode. And just as a quick little reminder, what is Frankenstein's first name? Victor. So yeah, so you guys will see that on my my breakdown. I'll go into it pretty deep into it. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot.
Is that Victor with a K, by the way?
Maybe. No, it's with the C, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I like the idea that it's with the K. Yeah, and that's a great, that kind of leads into what I wanted to start out with, but just to kind of talk about some of what you're saying there. I do agree, Gil. We're watching this cycle, like the addiction cycle, the relapse. And that was my big question at the end of the last episode, because it seemed kind of like he was getting off scot-free, and that would be a bad thing for an addict to have happen, because, if you get away with doing the thing you're not supposed to do, then you're more likely to do it again, right? I mean, if there's no consequences, then why the hell not? And so I was pretty focused in on that at the end of the last episode of like, well, this is the worst thing that could have happened to him. Yeah, he pulled it off, but now, how does he put how does he walk away from that? We saw that he was instantly lifted up. He was a different version of Gene that we hadn't seen before, and that he's smiling at work and he seems a lot more lively. And I was glad that they hit that right away here. And like you said, there's it's a circle, it's a cycle, and whenever he does this, it's in reaction to this pain that he hasn't ever dealt with. And at the end of this, even though it was a downer, it's like, well, what do they do? What are they actually setting up here? Are they setting it up for him to go down, hard, like, Walter White did? Because I thought there were so many parallels that you started to have to consider that in a way that I hadn't before. But then also, like, are they setting it up for him to make a turn, which is really hard to imagine, like where he's at the end, so seeing him sort of go on the slippery slope and just escalate all the way. I mean, they were like adding different components as they went, you know what I mean? Like he put on the pinky ring last week. It was kind of fun. And, like you said, I think we needed that for just as a reminder of who he is or more of an explanation, I guess, of who he is in that timeline. Like what he did there was necessary in order to make this feel like the fall that it actually was. And I think, what I really like the idea there you have there, Courtney, about Frankenstein, because, who one part of it is because Bob Odenkirk is so good at playing all these different versions of Jimmy McGill, so that they're distinct. And what does that mean whenever you have all these parts? What is the whole after you have the sum of all these parts? And it's a really fascinating question, I think. And so I guess, you guys touched on this a little bit, and this was the first thing I wanted to talk about before we got into answering questions. And that was, how Mike's appearance, it's one of those things, it was like, I thought there was a perfect ending for Mike, and I didn't think he needed to come back, but of course, it's Mike, so I want him to come back. And it was a really interesting thing where, he's saying, hey, stay away from this guy. He's an amateur. He's small potatoes. He doesn't sound like he's on Gus's radar yet. I think maybe that's a little bit debatable of like what he would tell Saul, but stay away. And we see that compulsion again. It's sort of like the switch back in season 2, where it's just the only thing he has to do is not flip the switch. It's clear, and he can't help himself. And that, of course, that's Chuck's idea that we heard Howard say just as recently as 607. So, the whole idea, the thing I wanted to ask you guys is how do you think this recontextualizes that relationship between Saul and Walt?
For me, I'd say I think I touched on it earlier when I was giving my
you
overall
did.
thoughts. But essentially, I think for us to view Gene's actions this episode as a repeating pattern, they wanted to make sure that we saw the events of Breaking Bad through Saul's eyes. And in his eyes, those events were a result of his choice. He was the one who advocated for Walter. So he made the choice. He caused a lot of the damage that occurred. And now he's making a similar choice again. So to me, I guess how did it affect the relationship between him and Walt? For me, it essentially showed us how he viewed it, where he was the advocate. He was the one, I guess I'm starting to repeat myself like Jimmy McGill, but he's the one who made that choice. And now he's making a similar choice again.
Right. And I think I saw a lot of people commenting that like Saul made Walter White, you know what I mean? And to me, I think that kind of misses the point a little bit. Like, I think what you're saying is a lot more important. It's what he thought, it's what Jimmy thinks about it and how he internalizes that. What do you think, Courtney?
Well, I'm kind of in the camp that it shows his culpability and everything that happened, right? So like what happened to him, the horror of being kidnapped, right? And then being carted to the desert in the back of an RV, and he's like, got a bag over his head and he's bound up. And then when he gets back on the RV, he's, it's just opportunity. That's all he's seeing. He sees dollar signs. And so it just really speaks to his really poor decision making. And I think that scene with Mike is just to reinforce that, that this was a really bad idea from the get-go. And again, with the Frankenstein thing, that one of the first thing he says when they get in the RV is he calls Jesse Igor, and then he says to Walt, "You must be Heisenberg." And I see some people in the comments being like, "But Frankenstein was the scientist, not the monster." Yes, I know that.
Mind blown.
I don't think it's a 1-for-1 here. And I actually, and I don't want to take up too much time talking about this because this is all I've been thinking about all day. I think they're all kind of Frankenstein type monsters, right? So like you see like in the characters of Mike, Walt, and Saul, you have these elements of different people, right? So like you have Mr. Chips and Scarface. With Mike, you see, like how he thinks of himself as like the loving grandfather and trying to do what, like he thinks he has a conscience, tries to do the right thing, but ultimately is just another gangster, like Nacho's father says to him. So, and then of course, Saul is a little bit of the mad scientist himself, right? So how he's able to put things together and stuff like that. But of course, he ends up becoming a monster. And I think that's the big takeaway. They all end up becoming monsters in the end.
Yeah, and that's why I really like the fact that this is Mike and it's set up this way, because there is that parallel. He's telling Saul something that he shouldn't do, and maybe he wouldn't do it himself either. Maybe Mike would actually stay away from him. But it's the same kind of thing. Papa Varga was telling him, you know, what you're doing, it's not justice. You're just a gangster and you think you have this code that you live by. That's just your way of basically lying to yourself to say, hey, it's all right, I'm different from these guys, when eventually he becomes the same. And, you know, those guys, some of them were probably pure sociopaths or whatever, but they probably had a similar transformation, you know, where they thought they had a reason to do whatever they were doing in a moment, and it spirals and it snowballs, and that's kind of where they all end up. So yeah, I think that's a lot more interesting than, oh, Saul stepped in whenever, you know, nobody else wanted to work with Walt and he made it happen. Because, you know, Walter was he may have gotten arrested. He may have, you know, dropped off the radar. Someone might have killed him if it weren't for Saul. But I think it's more of just like how these people come together, how they influence each other, and how it all kind of leads to the same place. And, you know, that's not that really gave it a dark feeling coming out of the end of this episode.
Yeah, this was not a fun episode. I didn't enjoy watching the heists or the cons at all. It was it reminded me a little bit of how, like, what they did with this character is similar to how Breaking Bad ends with Walt. You know, by the end of it, you know, you really just see how monstrous he is, like the Ozymandias moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just go ahead.
I was just going to, Courtney, just second when you said it, you didn't enjoy watching the heist. And when they were, or the schemes, when they were doing that montage and the music was so melancholy, I started to feel myself get emotional. And it reminded me of watching, I don't know if either of you have seen Leaving Las Vegas with Nicolas Cage, where the entire premise of that movie, there isn't, I mean, it's such a bleak movie. It's about a man who just goes and decides to drink himself to death. Like, he knows he's killing himself. And that's kind of what I felt like I was watching with Gene. The imagery of Gene lying in the grave dug for Saul probably also put that idea in my head. But just the tone of it and just seeing him doing the scam, even though I don't think he could really tell you exactly why he's doing it. I don't think he needs the money. He doesn't look like he's enjoying it. It is just, you can't look away, but it's not fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think they did set up a progression there. The first guy almost seemed like he had it coming to him. You know, I mean, he was pretty much an ass. He was trying to con Jimmy. You know what I mean? So, or Gene. So, you know, it through that montage, it started to get darker and darker, and, you know, you could see the character. You could see Bob Odenkirk, you know, just getting more and more caught up as it went on too. And of course, it all comes together whenever he freaks out on Buddy. But yeah, I thought in the beginning I was like, oh well, this isn't that bad, you know what I mean? And you know, pretty quickly you're like, oh, this is terrible. What is he doing? You know?
Well, and he's drugging people, which feels
Yeah.
like, of course, he did that with Howard, but every scam up until then, he, at least you could say, he kind of takes advantage of people's attempting to do something they shouldn't, like with the watch scam back in the day. People were trying, he set people up to try and screw him over, and then he screws them over. But here he's just completely taking away their choice. You know, he's knocking them out and then taking advantage of them.
It's like Hannibal Lecter only eating the rude.
Right.
All right, so we have a bunch of super chats. Thank you all for asking questions. We'll go through them here. Marilyn Ailman, thank you for the $4.99. I feel that the Breaking Bad title has more meaning than just our viewing of Walt and Jesse. Saul's downfall was Walt. The cancer patient will be Gene's. I think that they definitely drew that parallel with the way they cut those scenes, and we're supposed to think about that. And that's the question, you know, that we're asking. Will this cancer patient be his downfall? I'm not 100% sure. We got 2 full episodes to go. I think that we'll probably go and spend some time with Kim. You know, I think we'll find out the conclusion of this in the next episode, like what happens when he goes inside that house. But I'm kind of thinking that we might things might be slower on that end if we can actually squeeze in some Kim. So what do you guys think? Do you think that it will be his downfall? And then do you think that we're going to see because I mean, the phone call thing, it seemed like, because we don't hear what she's saying to him or what he's saying, that's a setup similar to the Nacho call earlier with Mike, and that we'll see it from, we don't know what's going on now, but when we see it from her perspective, it'll all make sense, so yeah, do you think that we'll see quite a bit of Kim in the next episode, or is that just
Wishful
me
thinking.
wishing? Yeah.
I think we will, and I hope we do. I expect to see Kim for sure, and I hope we get to see her side of the phone call as well. As far as whether this cancer patient will be his downfall, I think he's already headed down that way. So he's already spiraling, and I think this episode set up a couple different things. It raised a couple different questions because he is creating. He's thrown out caution to the wind, right? He's not being careful. And there are a couple possibilities, right? So like Kim could say something. She could tell the police that he was contacted. I'm not saying that I think this is what it is going to be. I'm just saying, like, I think that they raise these questions. I think Buddy is also perhaps a weakness. Certainly Marion at the end, when she's looking out the window, when she sees them going into the garage, she's very suspicious. And I think, as I've said before, I think she's a lot sharper than maybe Gene thinks she is, might be mistaking her for one of his old clients that was easy to dupe. I don't think that's the case with her. And and certainly Francesca as well. There are a couple different possibilities for how he could get in trouble, but I actually think it's going to be his own doing. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, of course.
Yeah, I think I second a lot of what you just said, Courtney. I think the main point of him opening the door at the end of the episode is to tell us that we are essentially watching his downfall in progress, whether it's this particular moment or it's going to be the next thing. But the point is that he's being reckless because Buddy, everything he said made total sense. We're making good money. Yeah. We don't need this guy. And if he knew a little bit more, he might even realize Gene doesn't need this money at all. So he's taking bigger risks. He's being reckless. So if this isn't the thing that gets him, something will get him. When I think about the fact that there's only 2 episodes left, it makes me think, okay, maybe this will be the thing. But if it's not, I think there's something else right around the corner.
Yeah, I think he's definitely on a path of self-destruction. This is self-sabotage. It's almost like, I don't know if it's a conscious thing, but it's almost like he wants to get caught. At least that's how I read it. Because why take such a risk?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's self-destructive at the very least. I mean, he can't look at it and be like, wow, my life is improving as I'm doing all this stuff. You know what I mean? He's definitely, he isn't worried about, staying safe or anything. I'm sure, in his mind, he justifies this all by saying, no, I really have it planned out, so nothing will go wrong. You know what I mean? But, he's definitely, like you said, reckless is at the very least. Richard Seymour, thank you for the 5. What if Kim told Jimmy, Gene, Saul that she was cooperating with the police? I mean, I guess that's possible. I don't know how I really don't know how she would get on the radar at this point in time.
And what would she know about the events they're interested in, right? She wasn't, as far as we know, she wasn't on the inside during Breaking Bad, so she wouldn't really know anything that wasn't public. At least I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, a couple of interesting points though. I meant to hit on what you were saying about him not caring about the money. I mean, I think that him talking to, I know Tom Schnauz said this in interviews as well, but that point where he doesn't even consider what Buddy's saying, that he's just full compulsion, it does show that it's not about the money at all. It's about what he's experiencing internally as a result of that phone call. And the other thing is that it's interesting that when he makes the phone call, he knows where he thinks she works. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's an indication that they've seen each other since 609. You know what I mean? Like, did she come to Albuquerque during the Breaking Bad timeline and they saw each other and that's where he got the idea that she was in Florida, or is it something else,
Yeah, this was a question I was wondering, like, how did he know she was in Florida? Did she tell him herself that she was moving there? Because he knew that she was in Titusville and that she worked at some sort of sprinkler store. The street started with a fish's name. She knew all that. So I was wondering if that's something like maybe they stayed in touch at some point, or if maybe the scene with Mike was meant as a reminder to us that he was Saul's PI, and maybe, he was able to track her down for him. I don't know.
She might all, I was thinking about this today too, where Francesca even makes the comment to Gene. She's like, "Don't you have the internet? Like, why are you asking me about all these people?" It might not even be that hard to track her down. I mean, I don't know how much of a social media presence she would want to have, but I kept reminding myself it's 2010. We see the YouTube cat videos. It might not be that hard to find out where she lives, even if they're not keeping in touch.
Yeah, I thought that was funny because I just kind of think of Better Call Saul as a no internet kind of world. You know what I mean? It's pretty analog, and then we did have Marion watching YouTube, which it felt kind of out of place in a way.
Yeah.
Gian Torones, thank you for the 10. I'm one of those who have been disappointed lately, I guess partly because I'm rooting for Jimmy to redeem himself, and it's crushing to see him continue to go back to his old ways. I would agree with this sentiment. I wouldn't say that I've been disappointed because I think that they have a reason to go in this direction that'll make sense, at least as far as being a good story at the end. It may mean that Jimmy is not who I doesn't end up being the person that I was hoping he would be at the end, the character that he would be at the end, but I think it'll be in service of a good story. The thing that I did kind of pick up on, I think, in reading the interviews, is they kind of are, the way they talk about him, they're not very they don't look at him as fondly as they used to, it seems like, after writing this process. I don't know if it's about writing the ending of it and ending the series, or if it's just what he's going through right now, but it doesn't seem like they have much sympathy for what's going on with him. They're kind of angry almost, it feels like, or at least Peter Gould and Tom Schnauz both sort of sound that way in recent interviews.
Kind of like when Frankenstein built his monster and it turned on him.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Roger Rubio, thank you for the $10. Another great episode. I'm still a bit confused. I thought in season 4, Saul tells Francesca, "Tell him Jimmy sent you." I feel a little confused on that end. Yeah, he gives her a card first, and he says, "What are you going to tell the police?" And she says, "Talk to my lawyer." And he gives her a card, and that's when he says, "Tell him Jimmy sent you." As far as the phone call, he says, "Where are you going to be at that time?" And she says, "I'll be there, but if it doesn't ring, I'm leaving." And he says it'll ring. So it all fits in with what their conversation was. It's interesting because, this was the idea is that was going to be Kim. Were you guys let down by the fact, as I know that fans sort of figured this out in the last couple of weeks, like the popularity of the theory that was really going to be Jimmy calling Francesca, came up a lot over the last couple of weeks. Were you disappointed to see that that's what this was, or were you just thinking that was just fine?
I wasn't disappointed. Certainly after 609 and seeing the breakup, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be Kim calling. And then as far as the question of the lawyer, I know there's like a lot of people have many questions about how did X, Y, or Z happen? How did he get the diamonds? How did the office get fixed? And I was trying to manage expectations. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, maybe some of it, like it might come up, like maybe they'll show us the diamonds. Didn't he mention like a jeweler, like a client that was jewelry in this most recent episode?
Mike,
something like that. Yeah. When he was talking to Mike, he said something about a jeweler. Who knows? So I wasn't terribly disappointed about that.
Yeah, second that. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're cool. Formula 44448888. Thank you for the $4.99. Will we see Kim ever again? I think the consensus is yes, we will. Do you think Jimmy, Saul, and Gene dies in the end? I hadn't thought that, and I still don't really think that, but I think right now they're telling us that maybe we should be worried about it. I think they want us to think that might happen at the very least. What do you guys think?
I'm at least what you just said, basically. I wasn't worried about it. It just felt like just because a show is ending, it doesn't mean that the character has to die, right? There are so many other ways to conclude a story, but it feels like in this violent world of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, even when we see Gene, the stakes have not been at a level where I'm worried anything lethal is going to happen. It's just natural to wonder about that. But I would say after this episode, I am worried about it because it does feel like he's going to just keep going down. That doesn't seem like he's going to learn that he shouldn't be conning people. It feels like he's going to keep going until he hits rock bottom, which sometimes means death. It could be as simple as he scams the wrong guy, they get pissed off and they shoot him. It feels like if he continues this way, death is the just ultimate conclusion. Doesn't mean it'll go that way, but if nothing changes, it feels like that's the inevitable end.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is still possibility for him to change, to turn things around. I think something might happen, like theoretically, cancer patient dies, and maybe because it's from the barbiturates, some sort of counteraction with his medications, something serious could happen there that could make him take pause and give himself up. Maybe he's convinced by someone to turn himself in, and I think the only person that would actually be able to do that would be Kim. And I imagine that's probably how that conversation went. That's just my headcanon of how it went, though. So I don't know. I think there's still possibility for not maybe redemption, but for him to change. I don't think they're going to kill him. They might. I feel like that would be too Breaking Bad for him to die at the end. So I think they're definitely playing with our expectations, though, and we should be concerned about him because what he is doing is deeply concerning.
Yeah, just to reiterate what I said a minute ago, totally agree. They want us to be worried about that. They're definitely playing with our expectations on that. And I do also agree that, Kim is the only thing that, like, he is in the grip of addiction if we're looking at it just through that lens. And, something is going to have to push him in the direction of changing. I mean, he's if left alone, left to his own devices, he'll just escalate. He'll just progress further along into that. So it's hard to look around and see anybody else in this universe besides Kim that can make that happen. It's just that this call, as far as we can tell, it made him worse rather than better. Mike D, thank you for the $5 Canadian. 2 weeks ago, I guess color timeline was around season 2, episode 9 of Breaking Bad, based on the public masturbation line. 2 of you said I was wrong. Turns out I guessed right. Actually, yeah, but that's not really correct. I mean,
I disagree.
the other scene was definitely prior to this. We've seen two different periods in that. I mean, they said that. I mean, it's not just me talking. Like, that's what they said. It was either 2005 or 2007 before he met these guys. So we did jump forward a little bit here, but congrats on getting that. They did get to that point in time, I guess. All right, let's see. Formula 4 4s and 4 8s. Thank you for the $4.99 again. It's a really difficult name to read, just in case you were wondering. Glad you're all back. Wondered what happened on the Saturday night stream. Yeah, I Saturday I had planned on doing that. I had a lot of other stuff going on. Courtney was supposed to come and she was busy and had to back out, and I didn't make an announcement or anything because I was hoping to still do it even if I had to do it by myself. But when the time came, I couldn't make it happen. So, sorry about that. Let's see here. Johan Gamble Putty. Thank you for the 199. What's with all the shots of phone power lines? I didn't pick up on that. Did either one of you guys pick up on phones or power lines?
Well, we have that phone, of course, and then he gives the burner phones to Buddy and to Jeff.
I
Power
think he's
line.
asking about phone lines, though, like shots of phone lines or
That
something.
makes more sense. I don't know. I didn't notice.
Yeah, me neither.
Maybe it's Frankenstein's
Were
electricity.
there were there phone lines? I mean, the first scene I thought of when I read this question is the shot of the crossroads. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
there were phone lines in that shot. But
Awesome
that
shot.
great shot. It showed up for a split second in the VHS starting, which I loved. You see it say record, and then it pops up, so it's almost like now he's recording back over the old Saul Goodman tapes, which I love that. But that was a great shot, and it echoed Kim at the crossroads when I guess that wasn't a literal crossroads, but when she was on the road and did the U-turn after she found out about Casimiro's arm, and similarly self-destructive choice.
Yeah, well, she does come to a crossroads when she's on her way to Gus's house, and she stops at the light when the police pull up next to her. That's a crossroads.
Yeah,
for sure.
That is true. Paul Whelan, thank you for the £2. Kim is the only one who can save Jimmy, will she? Hey, that's what we were just talking about. I guess we didn't specifically say will she or would she want to. I mean, the way that I was, Courtney, you and I were talking a little bit after the episode, and I was talking to Kiwi at the same time. We were all kind of talking about different things from the episode, and he, I think it was him that I was talking about, like where she's at, and until we know differently, my thinking is that we're still in 609 at the end. She still cares for him deeply, doesn't believe that they should be together or can be together, but I think that she would want him, even if she's like completely upset about the fact of what he did, as with Walter White and all that. If that's just coming out on the news now, obviously she reached out to Francesca after that happened, but I mean, I think even then, there's nothing to tell us that she would somehow not want him to, do whatever he has to do in order to live a better life, rather than like, being like, wanting to see him go down or something like that. So, but does she have the motivation to try to fix this for him? You know what I mean? I guess that's more of what I think about, because she's got her own life. She's got her own stuff going on. And,
yeah, I have a problem with this question because it puts all the responsibility kind of on her. Like it's her job to save. And I actually disagree, Paul. Sorry to disagree with you. I think Jimmy is the only one that can save himself.
Yeah.
I talk reason to him. I think she might be able to persuade him to do the right thing, but ultimately he makes his own decisions, and certainly at this point, it's been like 5 years ish since they broke up.
Yeah, Courtney, I was going to say something really similar, where I was trying to play that out in my head, and it just does not ring true to me at all, that if you have an addict, for example, that there is this one person that if they say the exact right thing, it'll turn them around and save them. You have to want to be helped. And I just can't imagine what Kim could say to him that would make him have this clarity that he hasn't had until now. And I think the thing he wants from her is something that just doesn't exist anymore, that they can't be in a relationship the way they used to be. I think to your point, he has to save himself. Kim, I think, could play a role in that. But I can't see her being the linchpin that makes that happen.
Yeah, maybe in some far-fetched scenario, like if she were to bargain with him, like turn yourself in, I'll defend you, or something like that.
Right.
And that seems really far-fetched, but I could imagine
a 3 great sprinkler system.
Yeah.
I think I think those are great points, and that definitely is is the case. Like she can't save him, and it's possible that he can't even save himself. You know what I mean? But I think as far as his destructive path, that if anybody would have the ability to possibly get through to him, that he might actually listen to, then I think that is the case, like what we were saying a few minutes ago. The Judo Joker, thank you for the $5. Next week's episode is titled Waterworks. We learned that Kim worked at a sprinkler store. Could next week be post breakup Kim episode? Yeah, this is, I think, something that we all probably thought of. I know Courtney and I were talking about it yesterday. Waterworks, sprinkler store, sound like they go together. I mean, obviously Waterworks is cue the waterworks, like he said in earlier seasons about crying. That's another version, but the titles usually, apply to more than one thing. And I think that was one of the things that I was like, yeah, this means we're going to see her at work or in Florida.
Knowing the way they've been putting the synopses together for the last couple of episodes, where they get you to think one thing's going to happen, a new player enters the game. I'm sure this is going to be like an old love returns, and it's like Jeff's ex-girlfriend or something.
Rex from Albuquerque. Yeah.
Maybe we'll see Swimmy finally.
Yeah, what did you guys think about that send off?
Oh.
There was a lot of endings in this, but that one was kind of incomplete, I think, just a little reference to him, but we never found out what happened to him.
We're talking about the goldfish, right?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that if we see
McGill.
Kim, we'll see the goldfish with Kim, that she took him.
She got custody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he could be thriving down there in Florida. It might be. The change of scenery might have done wonders for him. No more Lalo tapping on the glass anymore down there. 8HNIC8. Thank you for the $1.99. Top tier acting performances from Bob this second half. I agree. I think that's objectively true. But I think that in a way the first part of the season, he was a little bit in the background with everything else that was going on, and it is nice to see as the leading actor, to actually see him get this much work, in these last few episodes.
I actually just had a quick thought on that, which is we've seen so many times Gene or Jimmy turn on the waterworks, like with Frank or at the insurance office. When he's trying to, or at the hearing to get his license reinstated. Yeah. So now I'm wondering if next episode we see the first legitimate, like true breakdown where Jimmy, confronts his emotions. We see real waterworks.
I think we saw that in the phone booth. I mean, maybe not tears, but that was definitely an emotional breakdown.
Yeah, that was
for sure.
That was real rage. That wasn't performative at all.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I'm thinking more of the specific traumas that he's used, like him and his brother, where he uses it as a tool. But I definitely agree when he kicked that phone booth apart. That was for sure legitimate.
But
that is. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you do raise a good point, Gil, about like actually seeing the tears, because there were a lot of like fishing and like water kind of references. So like when Francesca is taking the fishing line to get it out of the old water pipe, it's all dried up and it's full of sand, right? So if we think of like water being associated with this character, maybe he's in a bit of a drought, and we might see the dam break, so to speak. Next one, maybe. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Pete.
Oh no, it's cool. I lost my thought, but I don't think it was too important. It'll come to me, I'm sure. Spoonman, thank you for whatever ARS 100 is. Because it's yellow, I kind of have an idea of what it means. Why did Gene go immediately angry as soon as we panned out when he was calling Kim's work? I don't think yelling at Kim would be the first thing he does after so many years. My interpretation was that that he had to be talking to her in order to have that kind of reaction. that was the way I thought of it, because like if he found out she died, it would go back to what we were saying a second ago. We might see that first moment, and that was the thought I lost also. So it all comes full circle here. Thanks for this question that you asked. I don't know how long ago, like an hour ago or something. To see it's not really about the emotion, but it's about him actually looking at that stuff, right? It's like, can he actually look at it for what it is, not shove it down, not keep, going and doing scams and hiring sex workers and everything else to try to distract himself, and actually look at it and hopefully move through it. I mean, resolving that would be the big picture stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just wanted to make the point that we've seen this character, he does not process his grief like a normal person. So after his brother's death, he, does not process that normally. And then we never actually really get to see the immediate aftermath of the breakup, right? So we do this time jump to Saul. So we see like the effect of it, like what the long-term effect is that he throws himself into this character, and it's all business from like the moment his eyes open in the morning. He is doing everything he can to not like deal with emotions, not to feel things. So I think he's very deeply repressed. So whatever pain and frustration and anger that he felt following that breakup, we didn't really get to see it. And he may have never really processed it. I mean, the end result of that was turning into Saul Goodman. That's how profound it was.
Yeah, I've been going back through a lot of their early scenes, because I was doing a video, been working sort of slowly on a video about these two. And it's funny because I know they didn't plan it out, whenever they didn't really know what was going to happen as far as like what the future of the characters were when they were writing a lot of these scenes. But it's really fun to see how they went back pulled on so many of those threads that they sort of left there. And it's clear, his pattern's clear when you look at it backwards, knowing what about 609 and these last two episodes. It's obvious like how his mind operates, you know what I mean? Like, he, as early as whenever Marco died, he was pushing stuff down, you know what I mean? And he was throwing himself into hanging out at that hotel and floating around and scamming people, for the whenever we first see Giselle and everything. So it's pretty cool to look at it like that, to go back.
Can I just add one more thing about the phone call scene and the way they
Absolutely
chose to shoot it, the way they chose to shoot it, reminded me of the scene where Jimmy has just he's just been entered into the New Mexico bar, or just passed, right? And he goes and talks to Chuck, and he's like, "Oh, I can work here now." And he's like, "Oh, I got to talk to the partners." And then he's in the mailroom celebrating, and they're having a cake. And then remember, Howard comes in and everyone leaves. And then we don't actually get to hear the conversation. We're on the outside of the pane of glass, and we just hear the fax machine going. That very much reminded me of this scene. And thinking of those two different scenes and what they represent to him, it's like the two major hurts in his life, right? So like and even though it was Howard talking to him, it was ultimately the rejection of his brother, which he later learned is, it was all Chuck's doing, that rejection. And then also the rejection from Kim. So those are his two great pains.
So. Yeah. And that's one of the first scenes that really stood out to me when I was really trying to decide, do I like this show or do I not like this show when it first came out and all that. And I really like that choice there, because it doesn't matter. We can see we could see his reaction. So it doesn't really matter what Howard's saying there. It's how it affects him. You know what I mean? And this had that same thing. It's like, does it matter what Kim was saying on the other line, or does it just serve the purpose of sending him on this path? Because is there something that she could have said that would have really made it different? You know what I mean? Like, if he was bound to spiral, if it wasn't this, maybe it was something else. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a good question, right? Because we saw him get some thrill out of the mall heist in the previous episode. He puts together the shirt and the tie, and puts it down. But the way, and I mentioned this in one of my videos, that I saw that shirt and tie as just another way of writing SG was here on the wall, right? So like he's still kind of flirting with it, but like he decided to put the drink down if we're gonna think of it in terms of addiction. So it's not, I don't know, it's impossible to say, like, would he had not done this, had that conversation not happened, but I think that definitely pushed him over the edge. But I think he was already flirting with it. He was already kind of headed there. He was at a crossroads, right? He could have gone that, either way, but
I think I definitely read it as, I mean, it's so hard not to see the exact pattern repeating itself, where Kim rejected him and that turned him into Saul Goodman. And now she's rejecting him again, and he's turning back into Saul Goodman, down to buying that foot machine. He gets the Bluetooth and all that. But I do think that this episode really reinforced the idea of he's stuck in these patterns. So I think it's fair to say that even if this phone call hadn't happened, there's a very good chance he would have relapsed in a similar way at some point. Maybe not with so much abandon and so much recklessness right away. It might have taken a little longer, but I definitely think he's reacting to the trauma and the wound that's been reopened by this call, and he's trying desperately to cover it up. And that's why he, even though this guy has cancer, he's got to still go through with it. He can't stop for a second.
Gotta feed the beast and numb the pain.
That's right.
Big Ralph, thank you for the $5. Pete/Gil, you're noticeably not involved in this one, Courtney. The party can officially begin. When can we speculate on the Kim call? With the call, we've touched on it a lot since you asked this. I don't know if there's anything else. I'm looking at my notes here to see if there's something else. The other idea that popped up to me was Ray Seahorn's comment before about how there were fates worse than death, and I don't think that I could pull anything from this, that says, I mean, working at a sprinkler company after being a partner track lawyer at a big firm, I mean, it is a downgrade.
Florida, so I can say that I live in Florida. So
yeah, so like you know what I mean, like I don't know if we can say anything else as far as like, is this a fate worse than death, until we actually see her and see what she's doing. But definitely a downgrade as far as the job and future prospects, when you're working at retail or whatever. Dead Beef, thank you for the 5. Why didn't Mike tell Saul that Walt's brother-in-law is in the DEA? Huge miss from Saul. Maybe he needs a new PI. Yeah, I mean, I guess if we were defending Mike's choices here, we would just say he probably didn't think he needed to, because he made a pretty solid case for why Walt would stay away from him. It is kind of important information. I don't know.
You're trying to talk him out of working with him. Yeah, it might help to say, also, big red flag, DEA is his brother-in-law. Yeah, it's a good question.
I mean, I know that they did the tie-in comic that, showing how Mike did that, because that was sort of a question, because before Mike was a established character, it's sort of alluded to, but we don't really see how he ends up at the school. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the timeline of what actually Mike knows whenever he comes in on that particular day.
It might just be what you said, where he already saw enough to say, this guy's not worth your time, so I'm not going to bother to even continue looking into him. So he just didn't get that fact yet.
Well, he also researches him for Gus, and Gus is aware that he has a brother-in-law in the DEA.
True, yeah.
Yeah. Robert Gay, thank you for the $4.99. Which new duo do you find more interesting, compelling, useful to the story? Marion and Jeff, or Walt and Jesse? I mean, I think Marion and Jeff for Jimmy's story. Just because I've already seen Breaking Bad, so I know what Walt and Jesse, what part they play in his future. And you know, I think we touched on this earlier. I mean, I don't think that there were any real shocking revelations in what we saw there, but it as Gil pointed out, you know, seeing it from his point of view is really is really telling, and it opens some doors that, you know, add some dimensions that they can use again in the future. But Marion and Jeff, I mean, Marion especially, I just feel like there's real potential in that character. And of course, like Jeff is like the only person that Gene knows in Omaha, as far as we can tell. Like, so he was pretty necessary for this whole, you know, thing that's going on right now, because, you know, he was done with him, and then he was like, oh, wait a minute, you know, I need to do this, and he goes right back to him because he's like literally the only person he knows.
I love the progression of Jeff's rear view mirror stares, because it was like iconic back in season 4. I think the first time we saw it, this just what's in his eyes, this weird kind of menacing look. Fast forward to now, where it's just so afraid of Gene. He's like, look, I want to do the deal, but you know, I'm just thinking like maybe this is a little crazy. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, there was I pointed that out in my video too. There was a really great sort of callback to that, and you're just like, man, and you know, you kind of feel for Jeff in that spot, because all of his points are correct. You know, the drugs might not be working anymore. The tape is gone. You're going to have to break in. Like, it's not what he signed up for, you know, like it's definitely escalating fast, and he should be scared.
Yeah, and certainly since we know that Marion, because she tells Jean that her son ran into some trouble, he now lives at home with her. So she's going to, I think, have a huge interest in what they were doing out in the garage and figuring out what's going on there. So I think that's
that moment where I think it's going to be important plot wise, but even just that beat where she sees him out there and the look of disappointment and concern, that really hit me. Because when Jean, when she says to Jean, you know, you're a good influence on Jeff, that told me that he is still capable of forming relationships in a way where people look at him as a good person, and for him to just soil that here.
yeah,
It's just, I mean, it's all part of that downward spiral. It's just hard to watch.
yeah, and
Yeah,
her
and
how like crestfallen she is when they take their drinks outside. You know,
Yeah.
when,
yeah, that's what I was just gonna say too. Like, I thought that was a really, really, it's small. It's not a huge thing, but that transition there, it was showing that, one, like how caught up he is in this, like how much he needs to like get out there and you know, scam so that he doesn't feel what he's feeling. But yeah, you can't miss Carol Burnett's reaction to that either. Like, she's absolutely almost heartbroken to see them go. Like, you know, it's hard to say like what her motivations are, but you know, she definitely has a reaction there. And you know, seeing her and Bob there, I feel like that was a really, you know, that was a really loaded little scene in that little transition from inside to outside.
yeah.
Oh, Judy G, thank you for the $49.99. That's very generous. I really appreciate it. I looked here to see if maybe there was something to go along with it. I don't see it, but thank you for that. David Earthling, thank you for the $4.99. So it's Gene who's Breaking Bad. Seems episodes 10 through 13 are Gene's El Camino. Sans a soft landing in Alaska. Yeah, you know, he's certainly the one who was Breaking Bad. His El Camino, I mean, it's an epilogue in a way, I guess. It feels like it's more of a new. I feel like it's more of a new story than the way El Camino just really exists to show us what happened after, you know, from Jesse's point of view.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. It depends on how this ends, but right now it doesn't have that same sense to me.
there weren't with Jesse. There weren't big open character threads like there are with Jimmy right now. Like his soul hangs in the balance, and will he redeem himself? So plot wise, there are similarities in that it's after all the crazy stuff went down, what happens next. But I feel like thematically, there's a lot more here. Character wise, there's a lot more here.
Yeah.
Shane says what we were all thinking.
Yeah, I'm not going to read that, but I'll put that right there if you guys want to read it. Thank you for the $4.99 though, Shane. Johan Gorder, SEK 50, asked last F Sweden about spoilers with actor's name and intro. Pure. New question. A chance they might kill Saul now. He went too far in scams. What is...
I think for...
Who is they? Do you guys understand who they is in this scenario?
I think maybe the writers.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I think we touched on this earlier, that it does feel like they want us to believe that they might, if not, it's definitely a possibility. Do you guys have anything to add on that?
No.
Anything additional?
Just the spoilers with the actors' names. That was something I was wondering about too, because in the opening credits, you see different actors' names. And especially early on in the season when we kept wondering when Lala was going to pop up, and you see Tony Dalton's name, I'm like, oh, they gave it away, until you realize that they still show like Michael Mando's name in their episodes after his character died. So
yeah, I think they were saying something about that in the Insider podcast, that before they they had the entire cast regulars, whether they appeared or they didn't, and I can't remember what the point was. That there was maybe something that happened after episode 10 as far as how that works, but I can't remember. Sorry.
It's contractual. I thought that they had to include their names.
Yeah,
I think so, or some kind of Screen Actors Guild.
But it has changed to only showing actors that are in the episodes now. Like if you watch the credits for 611, it doesn't have Michael Mando or Patrick Fabian or any of those names anymore. And they were all series regulars, so I don't know how the contracts work, like if it was only for the first 10 or something like that. Ickley Bibrat, something. Thank you for the $4.99. What if Gene gets arrested and they decide to parallel chick coming to save Jimmy in jail, but instead it's Kim? What is chick coming to save Jimmy in jail?
Chuck, when Chuck bails him out.
Chuck. Yeah.
Okay.
Chick, yeah, that was really throwing me off. I was like, a chicken, like what is? But instead it's Kim, and she refuses to save him. I mean, that sounds dramatic. That sounds like, wow, wouldn't that be crazy? But I don't see a path to us getting there. For one, she's not a lawyer. The last time we saw her, and for another, it just doesn't seem to go along with the character. I think that she cares for him, and I don't know. It seems like a pretty unsatisfying. Like her showing tough love as he's in prison doesn't sound like a cool ending to me. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I often am. Matu, thank you for the $4.99. Thought it was clever that Jesse sits facing the back of the RV away from Bad Choice Road, while Walt and Saul sit facing down said road. That is interesting. I didn't think about that. Did either of you guys pick up on that?
No, I didn't think about it.
Yeah, I didn't. I was just like, it's funny to see Jesse forced to sit on the floor of the RV while they get the seats.
Yeah, I like the I like the I didn't get to talk about it too much in my video because it was just like everything that they said you could just break down that scene, and it would be a 10 or 15 minute video and it's on its own, because there were so many things, watching those two get back into that role that were just super satisfying. You just sort of forget how great they are together.
I'd also just, we didn't talk about it yet, but the cold open where they recreate the "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio," and actually, film him replaying those exact lines. Earlier today, I kind of put them right next to each other, the Breaking Bad version and then this version, and it feels like they cranked it up. Like he seems truly traumatized if you watch this version of it. It's like a blood curdling scream when he sees that grave in front of him. And there's almost tears in his eyes when he mentions Lalo. And I would just recommend rewatching it. And it's just really intense, especially if you compare it to what it looked like in Breaking Bad. And then when we come back to it later, when they're in the RV and Jimmy just does not want to sit there in silence in the dark after Jesse asked about Lalo. And I think that just showed how traumatized he was. Like maybe for a second, the Saul Goodman veneer slipped when he said, it wasn't me, it was Ignacio. And so he can't just sit there with it. He needs to get back to work.
Yeah. It's funny because I was trying to figure out a way to get that Lalo mention into my video. And it just didn't feel essential for any of the other stuff I was talking about. And then after the fact, like, how it always goes when you finish something and you're like, all right, this is done. And then you get the lightning bolt idea that you're waiting. And I was thinking about that. Like, why did they include that? I mean, obviously they wanted to refer to when it was happening, but also because, before that, he seems like, he was pretty okay with the whole getting, kidnap thing, like he doesn't really seem that fazed by it at all. So it's a great little character moment whenever he just hearing the name again, just to see how like continually like he's haunted by that character.
Yeah, it definitely
Because,
seemed like some PTSD, and I'm thinking of the Saul Goodman scene at the end of 609 when he's in his closet and talking to Francesca, and he says, "Oh, that's my Xanax guy." So he's self-medicating. I got the sense from that. So, and we certainly saw how he reacted to the events in Bagman after seeing that. So we're just because of how it ended with Kim, we didn't really get to see like the long-term effects of how Howard maybe also affected him. So I don't think Saul is just the result of the breakup with Kim. I think it's a culmination of all of those events. This is a deeply traumatized person. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I mean, he is deeply, deeply traumatized.
yeah, that's something that I brought up a lot over the last couple of seasons. Like, the whole of season 4 was about him not being able to deal with what happened with Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
And he clearly never does that. He jumps into changing his name and throwing the finger guns up at the end after faking being like broken up about it at the reinstatement hearing. And then in season 5, he just gets sucked into this friend of the cartel business. And then he goes through the desert and he gets traumatized again. And then Howard dies, like it's not a really long span of time as these things happen, one right after the other. And he's clearly never taken any time to deal with any of them. So you're absolutely correct. It's not just about Kim leaving. Kim was sort of like the thread of the person that still believed that he was something other than like his base, scammer existence or whatever. But, it was just a one and a sequence of a lot of different things. Amber T, thank you for the 420. I don't know if we have enough runway for a whole Kim episode. Yeah, I don't think so either, but I do believe that it could be possible that we just see what happens inside that. Maybe we get a little bit more Walt and Jesse, and it's like heavily a Kim episode. Like I feel like we have to find out what goes on, inside that. I think it would be a little bit too long to skip a whole episode to leave that as a cliffhanger, but I don't know. I mean, they've done pretty good as far as structuring things. So, I'm not too worried about it. What do you guys think? Are we pressed for time here? It doesn't really feel like that to me.
I don't think we're going to get a full Kim episode. I expect some Kim scenes at least, but who knows what they'll do.
Cindy J, thank you for the $5. Any ideas what the individual scenes with Walt and Jesse will be? No, but I did see an interview with, when I was getting ready today, when I was putting stuff together, I did see an interview with Bob Odenkirk where he alluded to it a little bit. And I don't know. He said that there was going to be more. I was a little surprised. But I think it'll be. Do you guys have any ideas? Like any hints? People have been asking me this for weeks, and I never really have anything that feels like, oh, it's essential. We need to see this thing.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I felt like I was very curious coming into this episode. Well, I didn't know when it was going to happen, I guess, but I was very curious what purpose they were going to serve, how it was going to feed into Jimmy's story. And I felt like in this episode, it was to help bring to the forefront of our minds the idea that he's trapped in this repeating pattern. I feel like that point's been made, and of course it will continue to be relevant, but I can't imagine we'll be flashing back to Breaking Bad just so they can once again say, see, he's still continuing to repeat the pattern. So it feels like there need to be some other reason, whether it's thematic or whether there is some logistical reason we have to go back. If there was some interaction with Kim, like we alluded to as a possibility earlier. So I guess that's a long way of saying, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with all of what you're saying there. It's always been the thing is that they show up, it's got to be about this story, not their story so much. And yeah, they'll just, I don't know what else they need to explore in that timeline, but if they're going to do it, I have a feeling that it'll make sense. Dylan Kubit, thank you for the $4.99. I think Kim was turned away by Saul in the Breaking Bad timeline, which is why the phone call with Gene had him so upset. Turned away. Just doesn't seem likely. The only reason I could see him turn her away in the way you're describing it is that he's thinking that he's protecting her for some reason. And things don't get bad until maybe like the last year that he's involved with Walt. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe he could. I don't. It seems a little far fetched for the one that she would come back and want to get back together with him based on how things ended, and then two that he would be able to turn that down. Shane Perall, you got another one there. Thank you for the 5. Better Spank Hank. Data deficient. Thank you for the $4.99. The identity theft scheme is in line with the Frankenstein motif and seems like a fitting downfall for Jimmy. The identity thefts. You wanna reply to that, Courtney?
No.
Since you're since you're the Frankenstein, you brought Frankenstein into the room.
Well, I'm not really sure what you mean data deficient. In what way?
Yeah, I was having a little bit of trouble with that too.
Yeah, I'm not sure I see the Frankenstein connection, but it is funny that at the end of two series that are so focused on identity and characters that are constantly shifting into these discrete identities that as viewers we can kind of pull out. Walt, Heisenberg, Jimmy, Saul, Kim, Giselle. It is kind of funny, and I wonder if it's intentional that the potentially final scam, the big climax, is one that involves stealing people's identities.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. I don't know what the implication is, if that's something they really kind of don't explain how he came up with that idea or like how he knows someone that they can go to sell this to. I'm not sure if we really need to know anything more about it, but it is an interesting choice because I think the point is sort of, that it's supposed to be kind of, um, it's an extra level of security for them because, they can do it and they can plan it out in a way that the person doesn't realize what's happened until much later, and it kind of makes it feel like, hey, we're not really hurting anyone here, we're just we're just sort of tricking them and whatever. And it is a lot more malicious the way that it plays out. Michael D, thank you for the $2. What's your prediction for the BCS DVD box set? I'm not big on not because I don't like it, but just because I've been moving around, for a lot of time, or I don't buy a lot of physical media. I haven't done that for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. You guys buy box sets, DVDs, stuff like that, collectibles?
Yeah, I probably will for this one.
Do you got any predictions for it? Like, I've seen the like the deleted scenes and stuff like that, but I don't own any of the actual DVD box sets.
Maybe a briefcase, JMM.
They got to do, I feel like, missed opportunity if they don't make it look like VHS tapes, or at least like put an episode on a VHS tape. That I would buy as a cool little collectible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like both of those ideas actually. I can't think of anything else that would be like a Cinnabon box maybe, but I guess that depends on what happens with Gene.
Yeah, and marketing too.
Yeah.
Maybe like an HHM file box, like they sent out those promos.
Yeah, that's true. I did see those pictures of them anyways. Sterling Baytel, thank you for the 5. I hope the writers are brave enough to give the audience what they want. That said, Marion kills Gene and she's Walter White's mother. Yeah, I kind of went into why I don't like any of the theories of Marion being a secret identity. It all stems from the idea that Jeff met him randomly at the hospital. So I don't think she's secretly someone else, but I think that this is you're kind of joking around here a little bit. Am I reading that wrong?
I don't think so. I don't think this is a serious prediction.
Yeah. So, I think it would be funny if Marion killed Gene. But
it would just be a riot.
But it might not make sense for everything that came before it. Time will tell. Thank you for that $5 though. The Hayes Records, thank you for the $1.99. Show ends with Kim taking a shower with the Salamancas. I've seen a lot of predictions, and then this is one I just definitely don't think is what's going to happen.
I have a question in terms of predictions. Do you think that we will end the show in black and white or in color?
Color.
Yeah, I always thought that there's just such a great tool to have in the box, right? Whenever you're in black and white to switch back. I mean, the Wizard of Oz, you know what I mean? Like that's one of the coolest things. Like I remember from seeing it in childhood, it's like, oh, it was black and white and now it's color, like it's just such a great effect that you don't really always have that in your toolbox. So you have to use it, right?
Yeah. Or I think going along with the second to last question we got about not giving the audience what they want, we all think they're going to go higher tech with color. I say they go lower tech. We're going to get silent film with just little title cards.
That would be cool. All right. Thank you, Michael D, for the 10. Saul defends himself in trial, takes the stand. He's going to win. Kim walks in, shades of Rebecca and Chuck. He breaks down. It all spills out. He finally accepts responsibility for all he's done. Yeah, I've also kind of been I don't really like the idea of him. I don't really want it to go to a trial, like switch back to being a trial or a lawyer show. I'm not saying they couldn't do it or wouldn't pull it off. It just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't seem right for me at this point. If he turns himself in or if he gets caught or whatever, I don't think we need to see the specifics on how that plays out afterwards. You know, I mean, I think that there were another thing that came up this week that I haven't mentioned in any videos or had a chance to was that the writer director of this episode, Tom Schnauz, he said that that whole thing with the flyer that there isn't a reward for Jimmy out there for the $5 million. There was that teaser, and that was something that marketing made up, at least the flyer part of it.
It's been fun watching his Twitter the last week or so. Yeah. Just that he's been going back and forth with some unhappy fans.
Yeah, he's pretty good at it.
Yeah.
He doesn't he answers more than a lot of people would. And you can tell he gets a little provoked sometimes, but I think he handles himself pretty well. Mm-hmm. I mean, he never like reaches like meltdown or just being like, needlessly kind of like, combative. Mm-hmm. It's pretty, I really do enjoy his Twitter, watching his, and he answers a lot of questions.
Yeah, he's great. He's fantastic.
Yeah, and I've mentioned I've praised him on here quite a bit, so I guess I don't really need to do it every single time, but it is kind of sad. It's his last episode this time. I think that I think that out of the 2 episodes he did this season, I prefer Plan and Execution, but it's more of the thing of like where it fell in the story. Like there's no like, this was a great episode, everything about it. I mean, visually especially, I think when you go back and rewatch it, there's some really great shots in this that that where they really use black and white, and the switch of going back and forth and the transitions were all really great. But I think overall, I enjoyed 607 a bit more. Big Ralph, thank you for the $10. My theory of the day: Kim told Jean she was turning herself in for what they did to Howard. It's eating her alive. Nothing to do with the con. Jean wants to get caught now. I don't know.
It feels very coincidental that she's thinking about turning herself in, and that happens to be when he calls. I don't know.
Yeah. 5 years later, right? Is that what? 2010.
Oh, this could be actually, this would be like 8 years later. Or no, I'm doing math totally wrong. 6 years.
Yeah. So that doesn't seem like it. That seemed to be like you said, pretty weird timing for her to just all of a sudden be like, okay, I've been living with this for 6 years. Now I got to turn myself in. Oh, great. Jimmy called. I can let him know what's going on. This works out pretty good. I mean, it's possible, but we have to find out more about what's going on with her before we can really even speculate, is what I would say. Mm-hmm. 8HNIC8, thank you for the $4.99. At Gil, when you interviewed Bitsui, he showed you a shirt from the job Kim has in Florida. I didn't get that reference when I saw it. Was that a spoiler? Go Sox.
Yeah, I'll admit that when he showed, so I don't know if you saw this, Pete, but basically we interviewed Jeremiah.
I listened to it. I didn't actually watch the video.
So like at the end of it, he did a little bit of a show and tell. I think probably fans of Better Call Saul have heard the behind the scenes stories where for important episodes, I don't know if actually it might be every episode, I'm not sure. But they hand out like swag, t-shirts. Mm-hmm. So for Nacho's death, episode 603, they gave out t-shirts that showed like chips being dipped into salsa, and the salsa's kind of dripping like blood. Then he was showing us some other shirts, and one of them said Palm Springs Sprinklers. And at the time, I kind of smiled and nodded, so I didn't want to admit that there was a Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul reference I didn't get. But now, I wonder. maybe we weren't supposed to see that yet. I'm not sure. But if it was a spoiler, it was so out of context, nobody interpreted it that way anyway. So,
yeah. There were some filming photos that hinted that she was going to be in Florida that I saw a long time ago, like, you know, when they were filming. And you know, it's funny because there's a couple things that are out there like that keep getting recycled, and I keep seeing them. But it's funny because I find myself like so like into what's happening in the mechanics of each individual episode that you know what I mean? Like it doesn't really fit. Like there's so much to think about that those external things don't even really seem like they influence like where I'm at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I had the same kind of reaction when Courtney, you and I were talking about this right before the stream. But when I saw the picture of Howard with the blood on his hair, you know, you would think that by the time Lalo walks into the room, I would remember that picture and say, "Oh, I know where this is going." But somehow I get so sucked into the story that usually that stuff kind of falls away.
Yeah, it's not like the guiding. You know what I mean? Like it's not guiding my thoughts. You know, like like you said that. I think I got in an argument with somebody, not like an actual argument, but like, you know, just a conversation, and you know, they were like freaking out, like, no way that could actually be blood. I was like, you know, it could be blood on Howard's head. I mean, it's on his temple, you know, like that it's not nothing, but you know what I mean? Like, what can you say about that? You know, like, you know, it could be anything. It's really, we know so much about, like, they build up the characters so much, and they have them, you know, all this other stuff to think about that, you know, that stuff is all pretty far out of context when you see it. Randy Suyamatsu, thank you for the 199. Last scene, Kim taking the oath for the Florida bar. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem climactic to me, at least for the other stories, but there is that teaser that's still out there of her reading the oath, so we might see something like that. Almeida's Army, thank you for the £1.79. It is the final scene, the moral point of no return. Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a couple of things in this that, and there is a progression to it, but I think that's the sense that you get there, is that once he breaks the window, that is a point of no return. Like that's the next, you know, that's the next phase, or I don't know what the word would be, but you know, like he's taking things to a different place in that. And you can't forget that this is a guy who is, you know, has got cancer, and that adds a little bit to it as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, and not to like nitpick at the phrasing of it, I would just say I think it's a point of no return for Jimmy, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's the moral point of no return. I feel like he's crossed a lot of moral boundaries already by the time he's gotten to this point. I think for me, the point of return was about the fact that he was doing something so reckless that is so likely to get him caught, just because he needs the thrill, or he just can't stomach the idea of not winning when he's pulling off a scam.
Yeah, and it's sort of like I said, you know, there's levels to it. When you think you've gone down so far, you can usually go a bit farther given the opportunity. Thank you for the 4.99 again, Formula 4.4s, 4.8s. What do you all think happened at the residence at the end of the episode when the cops came? The cops showing up, that was a teaser. That's sort of the mid-credits teasers they've been doing for the next episode. And you know, when I initially saw that, I said, "Oh, well, they're here. They're at. This is going to be the next step in what happens inside the Cancer Man's house." And then when we were talking about it, Courtney, you brought up the idea that it could be anywhere. This could be at Gene's place. I don't think it is based on the street there, but Marion's place is another one. I think that you were saying. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure. So with these teasers, if you watch the teasers, you'll, I'm sure, have noticed the season in particular, they've been really, really big on misdirection, and that they showed this, it's just a couple seconds of some cop cars right after the end of this episode, right, where he's breaking into this guy's house. Of course, logically, you're going to think, oh, the cops show up to this house. Not necessarily, right? It may be something else entirely that happened. So one thing I just wanted to point out is that we see a life alert necklace around Marion's neck, and they very prominently display it. So, I mean, that could just be like a choice in wardrobe, right? She's an older woman, but I think that it might come into play. It might be one of those Chekhov gun sort of things where she might be in some sort of situation where, she needs medical help, or maybe she hits it to surreptitiously call the authorities or something. There's a lot of different possibilities. So I wouldn't put too much stock into this teaser really having anything to do with the events at this guy's house. It could, but it could just as easily not.
Yeah, someone on my timeline posted a picture of the Medi Alert necklace, and thought there might be something to that too, because it is pretty conspicuous. You can't miss it. The other thing, the laptop, that seems like a really odd choice too. I mean, of course, when you have the internet, like Francesca brought up in the phone call, you can look stuff up. So there's definitely a possibility that she might learn about who Gene Dakovic really is now that she has the internet. But
we talked a little bit about the teaser for the $5 million reward not being legit. That's not real. Yeah. However, how do you guys feel about American Greed, since they actually did work on it, right? So the Better Call Saul writers and team, producers, etc., did work on that production. Do you consider that canon?
Yeah, I sort of do until told otherwise. You know what I mean? Like, they promoted it. It was on the AMC Plus app. You know what I mean? Like, where you could watch it. It wasn't. Like, if they're not considering it canon, then they should probably tell us that.
Yeah, I have to embarrassed to admit I haven't watched it. And partly because I think in my head, I've always categorized it as all the extra stuff that they do, like Slip and Jimmy, the employee training. They just released a video of Bob Odenkirk teaching you how to tie a tie, I think. So I've watched some of that stuff. And now a lot of people have told me American Greed is worth watching. So I've been meaning to, but I just haven't yet.
Well, anyway, I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun if like Marion sees it, like she watches it?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Or finds like a YouTube clip of it or something.
Yeah, I don't. That's what I was trying to just ascertain, is when I think that happened. Though, it's a question, and they might not be able to tell us whether it's canon or not, because obviously he's not caught. It doesn't have an ending or anything as far as we see. It's really only to the first commercial break of the show, so we don't even know where it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that's a good idea of her, seeing a clip of that on her, in between her hilarious and enjoyable cat videos that Gene taught her how to find. So, he would be right there in the pipeline of her finding out who he is. Christopher Dalton, thank you for the 2. Can Vince and Peter not write one happy ending?
I think you have to read that in the proper tone. Can they not write one happy ending?
Yeah, you're right. They even capitalized the whole thing. Is Jesse's not somewhat happy? Is El Camino that's not a happy ending?
I mean, I feel like given the circumstances, I can't imagine a happier ending.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of the best that he could hope for at that point. I mean, he went through the ringer to get there, but
yeah. I feel the same way about Walt. I feel like he got a really good ending for him, considering everything possible. He got to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish, and he was going to die of cancer anyway. So he got to go out on his own terms. He got to avenge his brother-in-law's death. He got to take out the Jack and his gang. He got to leave money for his family. So
yeah, I think that there's a pretty strong I think that the finale of Breaking Bad is pretty universally enjoyed, but I mean, there's a pretty strong criticism out there of the fact that he did get that money to his family, that I kind of agree with. Like, they didn't want it, and it's kind of like for the character that he was, it's kind of like undeserved, you know what I mean? Like, you think about the idea of like, what does he deserve? He did, like you said, just sort of get everything as good as he could in the circumstances.
Well, speaking of endings, by the way, I think this is where I'm going to have to bow out. I do have one more thought on this, though, which is that I do really appreciate the fact that I feel like these writers will never just write an ending to be miserable and sad for its own sake. I think they kind of take on the responsibility of thinking about the implications of the endings they choose, and I think because the show's focused so much on it, but I feel like they think about morality. And almost, not to sound cheesy, but I think they do consider what message are we sending with what we show, and how things play out. And even if I know there's definitely disagreement over whether Walt got more than he deserved, but I think you can sense that they at least thought about it. And I do really appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the argument, like, and I kind of agree. Like, I'm even like in the initial watch, I was sort of like, well, that I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
I don't feel about him going to the like, almost just that part of him going to Gretchen and the gray matter people and doing that. It just seemed like, that's odd. Did that really need to happen? But I still think that that it's a great ending. Like, it can be both of those things. You can have that issue for, and still, I mean, watching it, like, I remember watching the Breaking Bad finale the first time, and man, that was a ride. You know what I mean? Like, that was just like an experience for sure.
Quite a ride.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
All right,
Pete,
Gil,
for having me on.
Thanks for coming out. We'll see you again next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. Courtney, it was great talking to you again.
Twice.
And everybody in the chat, great talking to all of you. And I'll see you next week.
All right. And, if you haven't checked out his channel, I do have a link to that and his podcast in the episode description. So check that out.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. Take care.
All right. See you.
Bye, Gil. Yeah, so I'll hang around for a couple more minutes.
All right. Just let me know when you got to go.
Okay,
I'll be here until all the questions are answered. So you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. Mod Mary, thank you for the $4.99. Maybe Jeff wants out and called the police from his cab to report a robbery. I mean, that seems a little extreme for the character, as far as, he was pretty into it. He clearly is scared of what's happening. Do you think, Courtney, that he would be so affected that he might back out? That he want out?
No, I mean, but where they left it, like, he was told to come back in 20 minutes. So maybe he does, and maybe that's the drama. He doesn't come out, or, I don't imagine Jeff getting cold feet at this moment. I can see other things going wrong, though.
Yeah. That's I think Jeff is. I think he looks up to Gene, doesn't he? He wants to show him that he can exist in this world. So it would seem a little abrupt if he all of a sudden just sort of gave up that easily. Dana LS, thank you for the 5. What do you think about Gene just showing up unexpectedly in Florida to see Kim? Maybe like a Shawshank Redemption moment, far and free from it all. Well, there's nothing tying him to where he's at. I think that his reaction to what Francesca said indicates that he does have plenty of money on top of those diamonds or whatever. Like, he's not really hurting for cash. So he could just leave this world that Ed the Disappear set up for him. It all just really depends on that phone call, though. It's sort of like this thing, like, it's really hard to say, because if he's just going to, if if it's just going to cause more problems, then I don't see him doing it, you know?
Yeah, I don't see him going to Florida to see her. I can see them reconnecting maybe in like Albuquerque, but I don't see
Yeah.
him
I
going.
mean, he knows where she's at. He could do it, but the call is a pretty big indication that it would be bad, you know?
Mhm.
He got some but until we know what that is that they were talking about, then it's hard to say, you know. I don't know. Almeida's Army, thank you again for the £1.79. Walt and Gene Breaking Bad on their 50th equals perfection. Yeah, the idea that this is Saul's birthday whenever he gets that call is easy to overlook in with everything else that's going on. It is his 50th. Is that true?
I don't know, but I did notice that too, Almeida's Army. I think it's interesting this sort of like ending on the birthday being significant. So, you know,
Yeah.
another year, time to reflect on maybe where you've come from or how you've grown, or in this case, maybe not grown. So, you know, it's sort of traditionally taking stock of your life, or I guess some people do that, but the significance of the birthday does seem important in this world.
Yeah, the other thing, and I saw that there was you know, a lot of talk about the dates, and somebody else said that the day that, what was it? I forget where I saw this. The day whenever that he gets something happens on the same day that he left New Hampshire as well. There's even another um parallel between Walt and Saul, like what they're doing, but I can't, it's escaping me right now. Like whenever I was looking at the dates last week, it was, you know, it was pretty clear that it was between when he died and, um, you know, this call that was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
But then I saw somebody else saying that something happened before, like, you know, something that happened in the Gene timeline. He made a decision or something that corresponded with Walt deciding to leave New Hampshire before he went back and died. But I can't remember. It's something about the scam, I guess, but because, you know, some time passes there, so I don't know. Fundamento Ivan S. Thank you for the $4.99. The end, he will die of a heart attack watching Kim with his daughter, and before they saw Saul, he fall and the camera goes up like when Walter dies. Do you think that they have a daughter, Courtney?
No, and I think that comes from there on IMDb some time ago. It had been listed that there was this actress playing daughter in episode 10. And of course, as we have found out, IMDb is not all that reliable. And the actress, I think her name is Dominique Pexa, on Instagram some time ago had posted her character's name or something like that, that she was going to be on Better Call Saul. And it turns out, I think she was in the last episode. I think she was one of the Cinnabon customers at the end. Right before he goes on his lunch break, there's a woman and her daughter, and he's making
Yeah.
them a drink. I think that's the daughter that people have been talking about potentially being.
Sounds right. Yeah.
So, I mean, of course, also the question that was Kim pregnant when they broke up. Sure, it's possible. I think it's a little soap opera-y, though. I don't think they're going to go that way. I hope they actually go that way. I hope that they would treat Kim more as a fully developed character with agency beyond and story beyond just like her relationship to the men in her life or a child in her life, right? Like
Yeah.
not that working at a sprinkler store is all that great of a life, but at least it's a decision.
It's her choice.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I always see these people with theories that, oh, he's going to see her and he's going to find out she moved on and she's married and she has kids, and that just doesn't seem like the character that we've known all this time. You know what I mean? That, like, oh, she just got away from Jimmy and she could finally settle down. You know, like it just doesn't seem like her trajectory. You know, I'd like to see something more complicated and interesting.
Certainly could be, but you know, as if that's what she wanted to do, that she wants to be happy. But at least the way the writers have talked about the character and the way that Ray Seahorn has described her, I don't imagine that she's all that happy with her life. So
Yeah, this is something that we haven't really got to in. It's something I've been thinking about, and I haven't really got to it in any of the recent streams. Is like, what do you think is actually like? What do you think the prospects of how she's doing is? You know, because I thought that there was a real kind of hint that she was shifting blame, like she was taking on the blame for herself in 609, and that led me to believe that, you know, she would kind of be, you know, not in the greatest place when she left there. I mean, and a lot of time has passed, but you know, there was that idea of fates that were worse than death, and all this other stuff. I mean, what is your general feeling like? Do you think that when she left, like that she had the opposite reaction? I mean, because when she left, Jimmy turned into Saul. You know, like things got worse, and I kind of feel like that there's a chance that her situation may be similar. Like
it could,
not in that she's like
yeah.
just like full blown addiction, but that maybe that, you know, that she can't compartmentalize the what happened in the same way that he does, or I don't know. I mean, I just think that there's it's definitely possible that wherever she's at, it's a dark place.
Yeah, and I really hope we do get more Kim backstory. So I would really appreciate that. Just not just because I like the character, but because she for me has always been the biggest mystery of the show, how she's thinking and feeling. And so you know, the what that she decided to end the relationship showed that this is that she is able to make decisions where like other characters can't, right? Or they choose something different, right? Where she was deciding to step away. So that was a very conscious decision. So I don't imagine her being in a lot of trouble, but I don't imagine her being particularly happy. But all this to say, I'm not really sure. I'm so curious to know what she's been up to, though, and what her life has been like after that. Because to your point about how we see what happens to Jimmy when they're breaking up, she says, you know, to get or apart, we're okay, right? And then, but when we're together, we're poison. And we see that he is, I would say, arguably worse off
Yeah.
in her absence, right? So, and this isn't to say that this was Kim's fault, though, that happened, of course.
No.
I'm curious to see also if she, to your point, has she been affected in sort of the same way? Is she coping, or you know, has she spiraled? I don't know.
Yeah, that would be even another layer of the of tragic kind of too, wouldn't it? If you say, "Oh, we have to be apart from each other because that's the only way that we're okay," then you both find out that you're not okay, and then the answer is still not like, "Well, maybe we should get back together then," because that would that's not going to fix it, right?
Yeah. I think Kim was, in many ways, at least in the beginning, good for him because I think people tend to forget that he was kind of sleazy before he started dating her, like the way he was in Cicero, the sort of schemes and
Mm.
cons he was playing with Marco. You know, we see him sort of womanizing and all that. So, I mean, he still had a conscience somewhat, though, and he wasn't obviously to the extremes of Saul Goodman. But it was, I think, really Kim that seeing what was possible with her and that she was being starting to become a lawyer that made him want to aspire to more. So I think in that regard, she was a very positive influence on him. And then of course things spiraled, though, as we know. We saw that it, you know, they brought out the worst in each other in some ways. So I don't know. It's such a tragic love story, those two, because the love is so sincere and so genuine. At least
Yeah.
in my opinion, I really see the potential there for goodness in both of them. That it just didn't go that way.
Yeah. I agree. Kathy Bennett, thank you for the 9.99. The first guy Gene conned in this episode is Devin Rattray, Buzz in Home Alone. Thank you for a great channel. I didn't recognize this guy, but I did read something about this. He was and I couldn't remember Home Alone all that well either, to be honest. But it was his brother, Macaulay Culkin's brother, I think is what. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I don't recognize the actor's name. I thought the guy kind of looked like Orson Welles.
Yeah, I thought he was playing it like Orson Welles. That's funny that you say that, because I was expecting when I was reading about it, like people would point that out, and you're the first person that I heard say it. But
Oh,
that I
really?
was
Yeah.
100% on that too. I was like, is this guy doing Orson Welles on purpose, or is that, is there something more to this? Kind of an obnoxious, scammer, Orson Welles, but I thought like his delivery, it seemed like it really was a call to that. Wait, whoa, that's way too many unconnected letters in a row.
Mateus?
Mateus, then there's a Q. You see?
Mhm.
QL Produsos. Either way, I know I butchered it, but thank you for the 2R. Hi, Pete. Any chance we see Ed's book once again? I think it is implied in the conversation with Mike that he has that, right? But we still haven't seen how he got it. I don't know, because because it was implied in that conversation. I don't think that they would necessarily go back and do that. Because we know that he said he was going to sell it, so we could just assume that Saul bought it at some point.
I think it's like one of those things. It would be fun if they answered it, but I wouldn't hold your breath. With
Yeah.
2 episodes left, we'll
Yeah.
see.
It would require another trip back in time too, to a different timeline. So that makes it seem even less likely, as far as that goes. Fearless Duck, thank you for the 199. Favorite shot from the episode? I really liked the shot of him inside the phone booth from above. That was really like kind of claustrophobic, and sort of that sense of the walls are closing in on you as this is going down. I really liked that one. There was a couple that were just straight shots of the bars. There was one where he was sitting next to the guy with cancer, and they looked at each other, and there was a really nice symmetry, and just the black and white made that look so much more regal than it probably actually is when you see it in color. Like, it's probably a pretty normal looking bar. We kind of already mentioned the overhead shot of the crossroads. That one was fantastic.
Yeah, the crossroads certainly stands out. I also really liked the phone booth scene. I see a couple of people have mentioned it in the comments, but yeah, it also for me reminded me of Goodfellas, the scene where Bob De Niro's character, also Jimmy, finds out that Joe Pesci's character Tommy has been killed, and that's his reaction. He bangs the phone on the receiver, and then he kicks the glass. So I thought that was a fun little homage to Scorsese, whether that was intentional or not. I don't know.
I think it was, like, you brought this up yesterday, and so I didn't mention it whenever I was talking about it, because I didn't want to steal your thunder. But the I did I mean, I did, whenever he was smashing that, like I said when we were talking, that like that seemed really familiar, but I thought maybe it was a callback to something that happened earlier in Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad. And I think you're right on that. It was a Goodfellas reference. And that I didn't read it, but I saw there was a post there, they pointed out some other comparisons to Goodfellas, and you brought that up too, about him saying, "Oh, but I didn't spend any money on the computer. It was no big deal. It wasn't a big,
Yeah,
there's probably more of them in there if you think about it."
yeah.
Mike D, thank you for the $2 Canadian. The grave foreshadowing looks stark for Gene. Yeah, and the last one was asking us about favorite shots, and then there was the transitions, because there were some great transitions in this one too. And I think the grave, Gil brought this up earlier. What I was thinking about it was, whenever you see that, it's the bed that he made for himself in Omaha, and it kind of it kind of comes from that first meeting in some ways. And yeah, I thought that was, like, I thought this was the camera flickering, or the candle flickering from 607. That was this episode's version of that, like that visual thing that you're just like, wow, that really sticks with you.
Yeah, it was certainly, I think, a visual play on, how did Gil say it? I really like the way he said it. The grave that was dug for Saul becomes, the bed that Gene has to lie in, and that's certainly how I read it too. So he made his bed sort of, the expression, and now he's got to lie in it, and dug his own grave, so to speak. But also more symbolically, right? Like thinking in terms of like the death of the different iterations of this character. So like the end of Jimmy, the end of Saul, the end of Gene. So it may have, something, some play there.
Yeah, and they said in the Insider podcast that they had to, that place where they went originally no longer existed, so they had to completely recreate this grave site. The whole going out to the desert thing in a different place than what they did in Breaking Bad season 2, episode 8.
Mm-hmm.
Rohan Pandy, thank you for 100 of those things. Was there a hint of sympathy for Walt from Saul before he decides to visit the school, or just money? Also, does Gene repent his destiny or his choices? Was there a hint of sympathy for Walt from Saul before he decides to visit the school, or just money? I mean, I don't know exactly what you're going for with sympathy, but I think that he saw this as an opportunity. I think that, he thought he saw this as a way to keep the high going, like he's been away from his life with Kim for 4 years at this point, whenever this happens. But part of what his coping mechanism is that he has to keep doing it. He has to keep going. He can't sit still. He can't sit with his thoughts. He has to continue to numb things. So I read it as, he looks at Walt as a way to keep that going. I mean, the money is kind of secondary to the effect of, being able to manipulate this situation and to get away with, what they're doing.
There is also a scene in Breaking Bad. It's been a while. I don't remember exactly what season or even what episode, but Saul and Walt are talking, and his cancer comes up, and it's something along the lines of Saul asking him like how serious it was or is, and he says, that's a shame. We could have made some real money together, right? So when I don't know if it's like after a scan or something like that. I thought there might have been a little continuity issue here, because we hear Mike tell, but I didn't go back to double check. I don't know if anybody out there knows what I'm talking about, but I clearly remember there being a conversation between Walt and Saul in Breaking Bad about his cancer diagnosis. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, but like you said, I can't give you, it's not something I went back and looked at yesterday. So I can't say, other than generally, I think there is, but I don't have a specific. And he does say that to this cancer guy, he's like, he does, briefly seem like he's sympathetic. Like, should you be mixing that, alcohol with your pills or whatever? And is it bad? The guy says it's not the good kind, and like there is a good kind. So yeah, I mean, there is some humanity inside him, but whenever he's focused on this, like I think that really kind of shows that once he has it in his head that this is what he needs to do, there's really no stopping it.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. Thinking of that scene though, when he's talking to the cancer patient, and he says, should you be drinking? And then the guy says something of like whatever the 2010 version of YOLO is. Like I think he says you only go around once. And I wonder if that was like the moment for Gene where he was like, I'm going to go ahead with the con. I wonder if like he was debating about whether or not he actually wanted to go through with it, or if that was all just an act. Was he just like feigning, sympathy? Was that just part of the act? Because for a second, when they walked outside and the cab came up, and the guy was like, "Do you want to take it, Vic?" Like the guy was different from some of the other marks, right? Like he seemed more human in a lot of ways. I think they were trying to, garner our sympathy for this guy. But for a split second, I thought he might actually get in the cab with Jeff himself, just so that they wouldn't pull the con. I don't know if anyone else felt that way watching that scene. I thought for a second he might call that off.
Yeah, they played with the idea that he could, and I had to go back and watch it to see, because I think it's interesting what you're saying there, that maybe he was just pretending the whole time. I mean, we've definitely seen him do that, and do it believably, and in serious situations, just thinking again back to like 410, crying at the thing, like he even had Kim believe that it was real. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna look at that again. I didn't pick up on it the first time. I thought that we were just sort of like supposed to say like, will he or won't he, because we know it's an opportunity for him to slow down.
Reminded me a little bit of the moment between Walt and what's his name, Mark Margolis, Jane's dad. Not Mark, that's the actor that plays Hector. I heard
Yeah.
Margolis, Jane's dad.
Uh-huh.
They're sitting in the bar, and it was something that he said to Walt that made him actually go back to Jesse's apartment. He was like, "It's family, you can't give up on them." And this sort of YOLO, or you only go around once, comment, I think, is maybe a similar moment for Gene, where he's like, "I'm going to push forward with this."
Yeah, because that is sort of what he tells Buddy later. The guy's gonna die anyways. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, Donald, guys. Yeah, Don Margolis.
And the last part here says, does Gene repent his destiny or his choices? And I think that's the big question that we don't know. That's what's keeping us on the edge of our seats going into the finale. Randy Soyamatsu, thank you for the 199. On the phone, Kim says, never call, Saul, exclamation point. Very nice. Oscar Alvarez, thank you for the €5. I believe they will show us how Saul Goodman is responsible of triggering Walter White to be Heisenberg. What do you think? Yeah, I don't agree with this. I don't think that they made this show to change the understanding of that character. I think that there's a lot more to Walter White, and how his cancer diagnosis and the choices he made revealed who he was, how that gave him the chance to kind of embrace this side of himself. Saul he obviously is playing a role in setting things up, but I don't think he has any real influence on who Walter White is at his core, and that's the story that they told. So I don't think they're trying to rewrite that. Do you agree or disagree, Courtney?
I don't think he's responsible for triggering Walter White to be Heisenberg. I think he was already on that trajectory, but he certainly, once these characters get in orbit of each other, they certainly they do influence each other. And I think that's a point that both shows have tried to make, the way that when they come into contact with each other, they are responsible in some ways for influencing them, but ultimately it's up to the individual characters, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was saying in my video was that that it's the story of these two people coming together, and that happening. And then if you think that through, if they hadn't come together, well, maybe there would have been another event that would have got them to the same place, if that's the way it was going to play out. You know what I mean? But obviously, when you have two people that are as they're substantial, these characters, and they're the strange ways that they operate, there's a lot of potential for things to ramp up whenever they come in contact with each other. Andrew Boone, thank you for the 10. Is it just me, or is anyone else at the point where you just stop speculating? Whatever I predict, it's never as good as what happens. Great place to be as a fan. Just sit back and trust showrunners. Yeah, I mean, I think, intellectually, sometimes I get to that place, but it's also really hard not to kind of run scenarios in my head. Like I could say that, like, yeah, I realize that it's better to just enjoy the ride and agree with what you're saying there, that probably the best thing that's going to happen is what they figured out, and part of that is going to be the surprise of it. But I can't really help myself. I still will speculate either way.
Well, I think that the show kind of encourages it, right? So, Andrew, I
Mhm.
do agree with you, though. I'm kind of at the point right now where I'm like, I really don't know how they're going to end this. And I love that it is a great place to be as a fan because it's enjoyable, right? Like, if it was completely predictable, it would be boring. Why would we watch it? But I find that
Mhm.
this is a show that really rewards us for paying attention to the details, right? So, like, they'll show us something like 3 years ago and it will come into play now. So, like, the conversation about between Saul and Francesca about the phone call at 3 p.m. As soon as I saw the 2:05 on that clock in the kid's apartment, I was like, this is phone call day, So, and being able to recall those details takes studying it, right? And of course, I think we study it. Everyone here, where we're super fans, right? More so than like the casual viewer. But when you're studying it and you're thinking about it and you're trying to imagine like what could that phone call mean, it's really hard not to go there and to speculate
Mhm.
what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Dapper Dave 2021, thank you for the $10. Kind of like the theory that Carol Burnett character sees the American Greed episode of Jimmy McGill and reports him. Also, kind of sad, such a great character like Kim working in a sprinkler store. The reporting part of that, I mean, I agree, and we touched on this before. The reporting part on that, though, that seems like a wasted opportunity of where you could have her use it against him, especially now that we know that there's not a $5 million reward out there.
Mhm.
I kind of really like the idea of Carol Burnett getting some information on Gene, and then trying to exert that over him. You know what I mean? Like trying to get him to do something that she wants him to do rather than just calling the authorities. But either way, I think we can all agree that we think that she'll play a bigger role. And I didn't
And
mean to cut you off there.
it would be very poetic too when you consider how he got into elder law and how he took advantage of like poor Irene Landry, what he did to
Justice
her.
for Irene.
Yes.
Even if it's all these years later, I think we all still have that's a sore spot for everyone that's watched this show.
Absolutely.
Steve threw up 5. Thank you for the 5. Nice ET icon there. Is there still a chance that Gene or Kim will somehow tell Cheryl what really happened to Howard? Can't picture any other way of redemption. I don't know. I mean, my initial reaction is that we've moved past that. Obviously, Cheryl probably hasn't, so I'm not saying it in that way. But Howard was, it feels like that chapter is closed. I don't know. What do you think, Courtney?
I see it. Steve threw up. I can definitely see that, and I think it would be a sort of nice redemptive end for maybe Jimmy or Kim to come forward and actually say that. But I think like that would be like it would mean that he had to come forward and turn himself in entirely, and then that way he could like share all of those other details. I can't imagine them doing it any other way unless like it sort of ends with him coming to terms and owning up to what he did entirely and giving that sense of closure. Again, I it's hard not to draw the parallels to Breaking Bad, and of course this is a separate show and we shouldn't look to see like the blueprint of Breaking Bad for what they will do in Better Call Saul. But I think of like the lottery ticket with the coordinates for Hank and Gomez, right? And that closure being given to Marie and to Steve Gomez's family, even though they knew that they were dead, right? Like Walt confirmed that on the phone. So it was, it was still, I think. a moment. So I can see it happening.
Yeah, I like the way that you're spinning that there, because as an individual act, it seems not that likely, but as part of everything coming out, and
Mhm.
then making that part of it, or addressing that part of what's happened, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But just to like seek out Cheryl independently, and none of the rest of it happening, that's the part where I feel like it's a little bit of a stretch. Dan Drzecki, no, I said it wrong, but Dan D, thank you for the 5. Waterworks is 2 spaces behind the go to jail space in Monopoly.
This is true. It's actually two spots before it, though. So it's like go to jail is in the corner, and then it's 2 spots before it.
So it doesn't exactly line up with the number of episodes that are remaining.
Well, it's 2 away from the go to jail. So there's like one other utility between Waterworks and the go to jail. So I mean, it would be kind of a fun little clue that they left for us if that is the end result. But it could just not mean anything. These writers they always crack me up whenever they're talking about it, and we're like, did you mean to do that? Like when they were asking Tom Schnauz about Lalo spinning on the silencer or the suppressor, whatever you call it, and if like he meant that to mirror the spinning of the soda can, he's like, no, I didn't mean that.
Yeah.
So, these things are just happy accidents.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking when I was looking back at their story too, because like I said, when you're watching those scenes that they didn't have a plan, but they wrote it in a way that there was a lot of stuff that they could use if they wanted to. You know what I mean? And I think that is something that they can do in a prequel series of a really famous, coming off a really famous show that was super popular. And like you said, that we're trained to look at all the details. There's so many options they have in that, of just throwing details in there, and just sort of having a visual language that they can go back and say, oh yeah, well, we had this, so we can make that turn out to be something else down the road.
Mm-hmm.
If I could interview Peter Gould or one of those guys, that would be one of the questions I would ask them, is how they really think about that stuff, or is it just actually just look that way to us because we spend so much time poring over the details? Because I thought, one of the things about the opening teaser in this season, and hearing them talk about that, and how they kind of front loaded pre-Easter eggs in there, you know what I mean? It's such a rich, the universe is such a rich place with so many different things that you don't always have with the TV show. We got 6 seasons of this, 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, tons of different stuff, and it makes it something I'm going to definitely miss when it's gone.
Oh, definitely.
Harley O'Keefe, thank you for the £4.49. What do you guys think? He went for a more malicious scam than before. In season 1 and 2, it was some rich guy for a couple grand. Now it's identity theft. Yeah, I mean, I think it's supposed to, like I said earlier, I think it's supposed to show a natural progression of, like, with addiction. If we're talking about addiction and substance abuse, you have to keep, I guess you have to, after a while, you get a tolerance or something, right? The effect wears off. You need to take more to get the same effect. And I think that we see that happening in the progression of his scams.
I think we see a very man, right? I don't think he's doing this for fun. This is
he's not getting the same thrill out of it as he was just even an episode ago, right?
It's a compulsive, like I know you've been saying this a lot, Pete, likening it to an addiction, but this is like an addict going on a bender, after being sober for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. Robert Gay, thank you for the 199. Compare the lyrics of Brandy to Kim's Present. I don't think I know the lyrics that well. It's the thing is, she's married to the sea, right? Isn't that the little refrain in there?
I'm not as familiar with the song, but yeah, that sounds right. I haven't studied it.
That's one of those songs that I can hear it, and I might even be able to sing along with it because it's just sort of like like a soft rock, you know what I mean? Like it fits into so many background music situations, but I don't know what the lyrics are actually about.
Married to
I
the
just
Sea, she lives
remember,
in Florida now, so
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like that's what jumped out at me from whenever he was doing the karaoke was that there's a thing like, but she's married to the sea or something, and she's in Florida near the ocean. David Seitz Jr., thank you for the $10. I can't stop thinking about how large that RV interior looks. Anyone else notice that? No, I mean, I thought it looked realistic. Was it always a set? I mean, they have a real RV that they drive around. Do you think there's some shots that are in an actual interior, or is it always a soundstage?
for Breaking Bad, I think they did both, right?
Yeah, that's what I
And
would think too.
that they used. So for this one, I believe that they had to build something new because they didn't have the original. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but
Yeah,
I
they
didn't
talked
really.
about it a bit in Insider.
I didn't really think too much about it looking different. I know a couple of people have noted that it didn't look the same as it looked in Breaking Bad, and a lot of people have also talked about how different Jesse looks. But that's it's 15 years, so it's not, I think they did a as good of a job as they could with that.
Yeah, it didn't jump out to me, David, but apparently that there is some chatter about it. Skylar Myers, thank you for the $5. I wonder if Waterworks could refer to the bottles of water in the car with barbiturates. That's an interesting take. I mean, like I said, I think it will have something to do with Kim, but there's going to be multiple meetings. Yeah, barbiturates, those knock you out. Water is a good delivery system.
Yeah, and
I don't,
speaking of water bottles, one thing that stood out to me is in the previous episode when they were doing the montage, and every night that Gene would lock up Cinnabon, he would the little cage that he would lock up. The last thing he would do before moving on, it was the cage over water bottles. So could that be a metaphor for the water bottles, or what will end up leading him to be trapped in some capacity, whether that means literal jail or trapped in some other way? So that could be another carryover. That's a nice catch. I like that, Skylar.
Yeah. Agreed. Carl Borchers, thank you for the 999. Maybe when Saul heard Skylar got off the hook, he decided to make a call like Walt did to protect her. Fake outrage and blame to make it appear that she was against everything he did. I think it was genuine. I mean, we've kind of mentioned it a couple times here. I think that for me, and that obviously I could just be wrong, and that could be influencing the way that I experienced it. But I just thought that his real rage, that was the indication that he actually talked to her, because that's where that could come from. You know what I mean?
I don't know what
But
there's to protect her from. So unless she was, and
yeah,
we may know that she was involved in some capacity during the Breaking Bad timeline. Although I would be surprised, I didn't get that impression. I think once she walked out, she was done. But we'll see. I mean, there's still some story left to tell. So you could be onto something, Carl. But as of right now, with the information that we have, I agree with you, Pete. I don't. I felt that was real emotion coming through there.
thanks, Carl. Again, Sir Torchington, 199. Thank you. Waterworks will be a life and death game of Monopoly. Life and death game. Monopoly is about being a landlord, isn't it? What's the purpose of the game Monopoly?
Yeah, Francesca's a landlord. Maybe it's her life and death
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
Was
What I remember about, I haven't played Monopoly in a long time, but what I remember about Monopoly is that it always looked so cool, because you had the bank and you had the money and you had all the little pieces and stuff. but I never remember finishing a game because it just seemed like you start playing it and then somebody gets the lucky rolls and has all the control stuff and they just beat everybody over the head for rent for the rest of the game.
I remember trying to always get boardwalk first. That was like when I was a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah, because if you had it, then you always had a source of income that meant that the game just went on forever. Marshall Higgins, thank you for the 5. Did Kim use Jimmy to destroy HHM? She wanted revenge on the good side of the law, while Gus used Heisenberg to destroy the cartel.
I think this premise is assuming that like that was always her plan, was to destroy HHM. I don't think that was like an actual agenda that Kim had.
No.
I think
No,
she
I go ahead.
gonna say, I think she had sort of a grudge against Howard, but I don't think that's what motivated her. I think she just enjoyed, doing the little schemes with Jimmy, and it really spiraled out of control.
Yeah, and the way she was introduced was that she was actually, she was grateful for the opportunity that she had at HHM. It was definitely a path, to a better situation. So I don't think that would really track if it was always her plan.
Mhm.
472, thank you for the 5. Maybe we'll see a Jane type scene with Marion. Maybe she confronts Gene but slips on ice. Waterworks ? And he has a choice to save her or not. Life alert. Man, that would be brutal.
Yeah, that was actually this was a point that I made in my breakdown of the last episode, but that was when I was thinking that perhaps Marion was on to him, and I still think she might be part of the story that brings him down. I still think she's there, but I really saw her as a much more. I didn't see her as not that she's not cunning, but I didn't get the sense that she was aware of who he was at this point. I think she's slowly starting to piece things together a little bit. But that was a point that I made, that she could be the Jane that is like the obstacle. But I've revised that opinion since, now that we saw that he backed and he decided to engage with Jeff in this con that he's doing now. Because before, when they left last episode, I thought, okay, well, it seems like everything's been all like neatly wrapped up, so maybe she's going to be the obstacle that pops up. But no, it's Gene himself is the obstacle that's popping up, right? Like in terms of risk, he's putting himself at risk.
Yeah. Yeah, that I'm not sure. Like I said, I hadn't really considered that. And man, if you really wanted to make us not like the Jimmy McGill character, like to abandon him once and for all, let Carol Burnett's character die on screen. That would definitely work, right? Cal, thank you for the 179 pound. Possible reaction with barbiturates and cancer meds. It's outside of my knowledge. I really don't know.
I think it's possible, sure.
Yeah, I guess the question is, to what end? I mean, would he then save the guy because he's there to break into his house? Or is this another Jane let the guy die and that would be bad? I mean, it would depend, I guess. But there's anytime you're talking about medication, there could be, interactions. Barbiturates, they don't really give to people anymore because they've kind of been replaced by what's the other one? You mentioned Xanax earlier. Whether those called benzodiazepines or something?
Like that, yeah.
I think, because I don't know. I think barbiturates, that's like Quaaludes or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that's my understanding of it too. Like they really knock you out. Like I think they've also been used in, I don't want to say the word, but date blank 4-letter word.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think those. I mean, I'm not young, and those weren't something that people talked about even in my my youth, of like things that you did for fun or whatever, Lunar Orbit, thank you for the $5 Canadian. I'm thinking Marion is suspicious of what Gene and Jeff are up to, and she's going to use that new laptop to do some digging into Gene's past. I think there's a real possibility. We brought that up earlier, and I would have to agree with you, Lunar Orbit. I think there's a real chance that might happen. Danny O'Brien, thank you for the $1.99. Menace versus Apprehensive, Jeff. Which actor did better? I think they're both pretty solid. I know people felt there was, and I do think that they do. The character is different. I read that they said that they wrote it for Don Harvey. They didn't write it differently. It's just two people interpreting something their own way. And at this point, it's just it's kind of like something I didn't really even think about in this episode. But I wouldn't say that makes him better than Don Harvey. I just think that it worked out that they had two pretty good actors for the role.
Agreed.
All right, Dylan Kubit, thank you for the $4.99. I think that Kim tried to reach out to Saul in the Breaking Bad timeline, and he rejected her. And now that he reached back out, she rejected him, making him mad. Yeah, this question came up once before. We've already addressed it, but I just don't think it makes sense for me. But I don't know. Has your opinion changed since the last time we looked at it, Courtney?
No.
Okay. Dracaris, bitch, thank you for the $4.99. I think Kim told him to turn himself in. It ends with Jimmy in prison. Kim comes to visit through the glass using the phone's bittersweet ending. Yeah, I think we touched on it. She could be telling him that, because that would be if she understands that the way that he deals with what's happening is by being Saul, then that's perfectly sensible for her to say, look, you can't keep doing this. It's never going to end. The kind of a callback to what Papa Vargas said to Mike. It never ends.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you can break this cycle is if you turn yourself in, if you take responsibility.
Yeah, it would be a bittersweet ending. I would be okay with that.
Yeah. I would just add though, that I hope that we would find out more about what's going on with her. Not that she comes to talk to him in the jail, and there's still tons of mystery around what she's been up to for the last 6 years. I would find that a little unsatisfying.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Devin Denman, thank you for the $7. Walt, Jesse are said to have one scene left each. What are thoughts on Jesse's being with Mike and Walt's being with Gus to close out those BCS arcs? I'm really up for anything. That sounds cool. But I don't have strong feelings about how exactly I'd like to see that happen. I mean, I did like the dynamic that Mike has with Jesse. I just have a hard time seeing how that influences or reflects the story of Saul, Jimmy,
Agreed.
Gene. But I do like it, so if they can make it work, I would watch it. And again, with Gus, I don't really need to see him. He had a great ending in 609. A surprisingly good ending when you thought that story was already kind of over. And so again, if they can concoct a way that him meeting with Gus would be relevant to what's happening with Jimmy and what's leading up to the finale of this series, then I'd watch it. All
Yeah,
right.
I don't have any real ideas either. I echo you, Pete. I think whatever they show, it's going to have to further the storyline somehow. And I agree. I think that Mike and Gus's storylines were wrapped up really nicely. It was a nice surprise to see Mike in this one. I thought.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you can totally bring those characters back, but it's not there's nothing really else to tell about them. Like we know the story of Gus and Walter White. Luke Duke, thank you for the $5 Canadian. Did Kim tell Saul that she wants to confess to Howard death and cover up? Conscience is expensive. Well, we touched on this just a little while ago, and our consensus was that it would be very suspicious, the timing of it all, so much later for that to come up right when he called. Henry Lemoyne, thank you for the $4.99. Do you think Jeff will die? Also, do you think if Gene gets caught and spills everything, he will tell the truth about Howard and say he was murdered? Jeff, I hadn't thought about Jeff dying. He doesn't seem to be in, I think about him getting caught or getting in trouble or playing a role in getting them brought down. But dying seems like there'd be some other steps between point A and point B that we'd have to get to in order for him to be, in danger that way.
I thought he might have killed himself when he knocked his head, maybe like, cracked his skull in the last episode when he fell.
Yeah.
But I don't see him dying. But as to the second part, we did talk about this a little bit earlier. I think if he does get caught or he turns himself in, I think there is a chance that he will talk about what happened to Howard. Because someone else had asked if like he would reach out to Cheryl, and we were kind of the consensus that no, we don't see that happening directly, but could see him telling, confessing to everything that happened at some point. Maybe. I think that would be a great ending.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay, thank you for the 5. Thoughts on or how BCS relates to the biblical Paul Saul, or relates to how often Jimmy quotes the Bible in season 01, 02, but not after. It's not really my area of expertise. What do you know about Paul/Saul?
That's just a whole long other discussion to have. But I think it raises an interesting question. I think there are a lot of biblical references throughout the story. So, but it's a little late, and I was actually that's a good question, Jay. It's a good question, and maybe we'll be able to talk about it more some other time. But I think I'm gonna to sign out tonight.
All right. Well, thanks for coming out. I'm not sure. I do think I'm going to be doing Saturday, so you're welcome to come back or next Tuesday. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Yeah. You can go ahead and, like I said about Gil, if you guys haven't checked out her channel, you should definitely do that. I put a link to it in my description. What do you want to tell them about that or plug before you go?
Courtney's reviews. If you haven't checked it out, it's Better Call Saul stuff. So kind of, what we all do, talk about the episodes. Thank you for having me again, Pete. Always fun. Thank you all for your questions.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. And don't worry, guys. I see that there's still a lot of questions here. I'm going to answer them all. And that's about it, I guess. Thanks for coming. Thanks. We'll hopefully see you again. Have a good one.
Yeah. Take care. Good night.
Night. All right. Let's see. Jonathan Goldstein, thank you for the $1.99. Is an identity purchaser supposed to be vacuum guy? No, I don't think so. He's in Albuquerque. The identity purchaser is in Omaha. Richie MC, thank you for the $2. If no Lyle, we riot. In agreement. That's going to have to be on chat. I personally, I like Lyle. He's a fun character, but I would be totally fine with without ever seeing him again. Now that we moved into Breaking Bad and Gene timelines. Matt Pollocken, thank you for the $4.99. Perfect scene to bring back Walt and Jesse. I know you all don't care about the aging of the characters, but they did a good job of hiding their ages. Yeah, it's funny because there was such a stir over the bald cap from El Camino, and so I thought it was funny whenever they did they decided to use this scene because it had the beanies built in right there for them, and I thought it worked pretty well. I mean, obviously, Aaron Paul is at a different point in his life than Jesse was, but it all worked for me. Richard Janvrin, thank you for the 5. I think the Kim lawyer teaser was in reference to her eventually disavowing her license. Know something later, in my opinion. Also, spoiler, marrying is Huel. Yeah, I think that one of the most popular theories about that was that it would be her that her reading the oath would be a flashback to when she first did it. So that's still a good idea, even if that's what they were trying to evoke. You know what I mean? I don't think that means that we won't see it again, but if we didn't, I wouldn't feel like that was, a big deal. Serpentine, thank you for the 10. These are the best 2 shows on TV. When it's over, I will probably spend the next few years rewatching this universe over and over like a psychopath. Thank you guys for the great commentary. Well, thank you for watching, and I agree. They are great shows. Absolutely. Schlupp Photography, thank you for the 5. Have we seen anything to do with those diamonds yet? I don't believe we have. What do you guys think will come of those? Love all your videos. I think that they were, a way to show that that in that little box, they were a way to show inside that little box that he wasn't broke, you know. Um, and I think, we were kind of talking about this earlier, if the origin story will be important or not. I think it was just a visual way to show us that, he has something to fall back on. They could come into play. I mean, they were pretty conspicuously, shown there, and so we'll just have to wait and see on that. Thank you for 10 through the 10. Gene might find the cancer guy very ill due to the barbiturates combined with his meds. Decide to save his life, unlike what Walt did with Jesse's girlfriend, and redeem himself a bit that way. It would be an interesting situation. We kind of talked about this with another question. It would be a point of like, what will he do? Will he make the right choice because he's clearly breaking the law and he's living under an assumed identity? I mean, really, the right logical choice would be for him to leave the guy there and not deal with it. So it could be an interesting situation, but we'll have to wait and see. PMCC, thank you for the $3. Maybe Gene confesses to the cancer guy or Marion. Confesses. Yeah, I don't know. Like like I said, I thought that there was motivation because of a large reward before for people to maybe turn him in, where he can maybe use that to help somebody, say, look, I'm going to turn myself in anyways. Why don't you do it and you get this money? But I'm not sure about unburdening himself, like I don't know how far that would go as far as, resolving his issues. We'll see. William, thank you for the 5. Francesca is being tapped and tailed. Obvious that so is Kim. Did they ever divorce? Jean is upset she is cooperating and gave up Ice Station Zebra. Those things may all be true. We don't know about the divorce as far as I know. But I don't think that the kind of upset he was is about learning that she gave up some of his money or something like that, because I just don't think that stuff matters to him that much. Tom Schnauz, he said in Hollywood Reporter about the money. He's not doing this for money at all. He's doing this because something about that phone call brought up a lot of pain and hurt. And as we know from the past and all that went down with Howard Hamlin and Kim hiding the truth about Lalo and the reasons why she did it and the breakup that happened, it all caused a lot of pain that pushed him into going full Saul Goodman. So yeah, that's I would say it's something not, it's not about the money, it's about something that caused him pain. And we'll have to wait and see what that was. Dylan Kubit, thank you for the 199. Do you think that we will get one more major death? I don't. I don't think it would be. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think we could rule it out. I mean, Marion. What Courtney was saying about Marion earlier could come into play, but I'm not really expecting a death at this point. At this point. Eli HG, thank you for the 279 Canadian. The universe pays no mind to what people deserve. Sure, but at the end of season 5, whenever Peter Gould was talking about how we should look at the story, that was the question that he brought up. What does this guy, Jimmy McGill, deserve? So that's why I think we look at it through that, that way. Hans Scharler, thank you for the $2. Is Kim an associate in Saul Goodman and Associates? No, I don't think that was ever the case. They shared an office, but as much as he wanted it to be Wexler McGill, it never happened. And so I think no, she now that she's gone and she resigned from the bar, she would not be one of the associates. Akshay Agrawal, thank you for the 2. Marion equals his end. Karma for scamming old people in the past. Yep. We brought that up, and I think that would be justice for Irene. That's what I like to shout that out whenever I hear that part of the whenever the conversation goes in that direction. Cloud, thank you for the 499. Gene is going to walk into the guy with cancer's house and see him taking meth. Then give him legal advice. Now that would be a twist. That would absolutely be a twist. Gene Takovic is not a bonded lawyer or he's not a practicing lawyer either. There's a long scroll. Hold on. I'm going to get something. Here we go. Big Ralph. Another Goodfellas reference. Thank you for the 10, Big Ralph. When Francesca told Gene she gave away all the Tigerfish money. Why did you do that? Yep. That's another one. You're right. Yeah, like I said, I saw that someone had compiled a bunch of them. I just didn't get a chance to read it. I just sort of scrolled past it. But I do believe that there was, like I was saying, I do believe that it was intentional and that there are more. HK, thank you for the 199. Guy with cancer dies and Gene gets in trouble. I don't know. I was thinking about this, and I think that him waking up, the fact that the barbiturates wore off, I think that there's a lot of potential in Gene being stuck there and having to solve the problem to figure out his way out. That's a lot of what things boil down to. So that's kind of where I think it's going. But if he does die, I mean, if he did die, if he's dead when he goes in there, then he could just leave. That would actually be, that wouldn't there was nothing that would tie him to that yet. So I don't know. We'll see. Tandrika Sanwal, thank you for the 5. Final mark equals final hurrah. Gene wants to get caught at this point. He has his way to commit suicide, turn himself in hopes that Kim shows up one last time. I don't know. I mean, I think you could make an argument that he subconsciously is doing things that could, in a reckless way, that could lead to him getting caught, and he doesn't care. I don't know that that equates to him wanting to get caught. You know what I mean? Like if his actions are leading to that, I feel like there's a bit of his actions, I don't think it's I don't think it's complete. I think it's compulsive, and I think it's sloppy in that way, but I don't know that he wants to get caught, and how that would make Kim show up necessarily. It all depends on the phone call, doesn't it? Thanks for that. Oscar Lopez, thank you for the $2. Increasingly static intro foreshadow Gene downfall. I'm sure that it would look like that after the fact if that's what happens. um, but as of right this minute, I can't say for sure. I like the idea, but I mean that's sort of that's sort of been the idea the whole time. The tapes are degrading, and I think what's interesting about that now is the idea of them turning on the record. Is it the idea that you could change? You could rewrite the story, you could rewrite the ending. I think that's what stands out to me the most about it. JG, thanks for the 5. Seems like the show is winding down towards a sad, tragic ending and not building to a climactic, exciting one. It certainly does feel that way. The question is that an indication of where we're going, or is that a setup for, for him to be able to turn it around? Dawn of Earth, thank you for the 10. We've yet to see Jimmy come up with a scheme without the most precise planning. No chance he's just being reckless in a desperate attempt to get his old life back. He's got something up his sleeve. Okay. I don't necessarily agree, but I see where you're coming from. I understand the argument that you're making. We'll have to wait and see. I really do feel like, that what we saw at the end of that was compulsive, compulsion, almost uncontrollable, but I could be wrong. Steve Bob JD, thank you for the $9.99. I got in here late. Do you have any big predictions for Waterworks that I missed? If not, or if it's too much to rehash, it's okay. Just showing my support. Well, thank you for that, Steve Bob. My initial thing was that when I heard sprinkler store, that it was going to be, a dual meaning, obviously, but part of that would be about Kim and her coming back, seeing her, seeing some scenes with her, especially seeing what she says on the other side of that phone call, seeing that from her perspective. Frog, thank you for the 2. What if Lyle is Jeff's dad? What if? What if? I just saw that there was someone impersonating me. Yeah, there you go. Peppers. Annoyed they spoiled the Walt and Jesse appearances. You know, I think that I think that it seemed pretty inevitable. And it's not a big surprise when you think about it. I mean, there might have been a chance that could have been like, think about the way that the episode progression played out. They jumped to 2005 to 2007 at the end of 9. So like, how do you feel like you would think? I mean, how would you not think that Walt and Jesse were going to show up from that point? I mean, I kind of get it, Pep, but not. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Agent Neptune, thank you for the $5. Gene's time has expired. No more quarters for Kim. I like that. B, thank you for the 5. What official crimes is Gene wanted for now? I think it would be RICO stuff. I think conspiracy, obviously, based on what Francesca told him. They undercovered a lot of his corporations and the things he was using for money laundering. So I'm assuming that there's paper trails there. Steve Mueller, thank you for the $4.99. Prediction: final episode is through the eyes of Kim. Possible. They did recontextualize things. The kidnapping through Jimmy's perspective. They could do that again one more time with Kim. I hope they get right to it. I hope they don't hold it off, but whatever makes the most sense. It's not a bad prediction. Milo, thank you for the NT30. Deepfake the earlier mall scene with the new Jeff. It's not something I would need to have happen. Maybe maybe people are watching that down the line on DVD, but I don't think it's not that big of a that happens. It's something that happens. Sometimes characters get recast. If you watch Game of Thrones, you remember there was a couple big ones in that, and it didn't really ruin the story. Maybe other things did, but it wasn't that. ADHD Whiskey, thank you for the 5. Thoughts on Kim moving back to Albuquerque, buying the Saul Goodman office, and becoming the new criminal lawyer of New Mexico? Well, after the last episode, I like to think that Bill Oakley's filling that void, but I don't really see that. I mean, she walked away. If she wants to go back to being a lawyer, I think that she would probably do it somewhere else rather than come back to Albuquerque. She doesn't really have roots there in the way, there's mostly just bad stuff when you think about what happened for her there. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't think it's very likely. And it looks like I've made it to the end. If you have any more questions, now would be the time to get them out there, because I'm coming up on 3 hours, and I'm definitely going to be getting out of here. So it's your last chance. And all right. So I'm not seeing any more. Are we super chatting until 8 a.m.? Let's see. If there's no more, then we're going to be going to exactly right now. So yeah, thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks for all the questions. Thank you to the moderators. It looked like things went pretty good in there, so I really appreciate it. Oh wait, here we go. Now I'm getting them. Dracaris bitch, thank you for the $1.99 again. What's your favorite scam of all time? I feel like we did this last time, and it's pretty hard. Just because I was rewatching the some of the earlier ones, I really like the way that they handled the way that the first. I mean, it's not the most complex or most interesting, but I really like the way that Giselle jumps in their Ken wins one. You know what I mean? And I just wanted to mention, Dracaris bitch, I did see your message on Twitter, and I will probably reach out to you at some point to respond to that, but I just haven't had a chance to do it yet. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, all of them are good. Like, that's one of the things that this show does fantastically is they really come up with some great ideas for the scams. Trish D, thank you for the 5. I appreciate it. Oh yeah, Scott, thanks for putting that link in. I was just trying to fetch my link to your channel. And yeah, Scott has a channel. He volunteered to help out and moderate. So do check that out. And that's going to be it for me. I thank you guys for showing up. We'll be doing it again next week. I think I'll try to come back on Saturday again. Last week, that was kind of unfortunate. I was planning on it, but it didn't happen. I'm going to try to make it happen this week. But I also have some other videos I want to get out, and those are kind of taking precedence right now. So thanks for watching.